A very good morning to all of you. We are extremely happy for your interest joining with our SLEMA annual sessions 2022 on the theme Green Hydrogen Opportunities and Challenges for Sri Lanka, which is the 33rd annual sessions of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. So Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association was founded by a group of professionals in 1984 and was enacted by an Act of Parliament in 1994. So we are with nearly 40 years of existence, and as a gathering of professionals in the energy sector, we actually SLEMA has been contributing to the energy sector, introducing energy management interventions and energy-related research, policy analysis, etc. So SLEMA annual session flagship is sessions is a flagship event in our activity calendar where we want to create a dialogue among different stakeholders on a key thematic subject area related to the energy sector. So with that brief introduction about SLEMA, I would now like to invite Mr. Chamila Jayasekara, the President of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitma. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all can hear me. So very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to welcome you all for the 33rd annual sessions of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association conducts its annual sessions as the flagship event of the annual calendar, where we can have a great opportunity to have a sound dialogue with all the stakeholders with the key current topic or maybe a futuristic topic which is very important for the upliftment of the energy sector. So for this 2022 SLEMA annual sessions, we have selected a very important topic for the future of the energy sector, the green hydrogen opportunities and challenges for Sri Lanka. So I am very happy as the President of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association for welcoming you all for these sessions, the participants joining from outside Sri Lanka and also from various institutes of Sri Lanka, various stakeholders. You all are warmly welcome for this SLEMA annual sessions 2022. So if you look at this very topic for today, thematic topic, it is of course a very sound emerging technology at international level. Particularly, it is going to be the next energy vector for the I would say in a decade or so. So for Sri Lanka, it has great many opportunities because you know Sri Lanka is very keen on developing the renewable energy, especially for meeting the electricity needs of Sri Lanka. We have a sound target of realizing 70% electricity by 2030, and also with a long-term goal of achieving carbon neutrality in the energy sector in 2050. So in this context, all of you know that we are facing huge challenges, of course, technical constraints, I would say, in absorbing electricity at this level to the electricity grid. So in a way, this green hydrogen technology can support as a cushion, by way of providing a cushioning effect to these absorbing constraints, which will be very helpful for the energy sector, especially the power sector, in in increasing the renewable energy absorption for the power system. Then again, if you look at the energy sector in broad sense, it is not only the electricity that we have to be keen on. Of course, if you look at this, if you look at the overall energy consumption situation in the country, even though we are very keen on power sector, running running of power system with a high amount of renewable energy, which is very good and which we are working for. But again, we have to look at that. We have to understand that transport sector have a more weightage on fuel oil imports for meeting the energy sector of the particular sector. So even though we would be successful in the power system end, if we are failing at the transport end, it again will greatly negatively impact on the overall energy situation of the country in terms of the energy resource aspect. So hydrogen, as I mentioned, hydrogen is going to be a new energy vector which will address all these areas and give a paradigm shift, I would say, in a decade or so, to the overall energy situation of Sri Lanka. So we, SLEMA, as the key professional body in the sector, is very interested in supporting the country at policy level, technical level, with all these, in all these dimensions. And we are very happy that Asian Development Bank is providing technical assistance for our journey, and also we already have, of course, for this session also we have international experts who are supporting for this in this subject. So we are very happy to start a long-term journey on this subject of green hydrogen with these sessions. So I am again happy to welcome you for these sessions, and we have another important side event also along with these sessions. That is the most outstanding award for most outstanding undergraduate research, because we are very happy to mention that academia and the students of the universities and other institutions are very keen on going ahead with research in the subject of energy. So in a step for recognizing their efforts, we have initiated this SLEMA undergraduate award for the first time. We are presenting the awards today as a side event of this. So hoping your interaction in these sessions and of course active participation in the panel discussion. I am happy to invite you the participation of you all for these sessions. So with this background introduction for the sessions, I would like to mention the I would like to introduce the session chair for today. It is none other than the former president of SLEMA, Mr. Harsha Wickramasinghe. Mr. Harsha Wickramasinghe is a product of University of Moratuwa, and he obtained his Master of Business Administration from University of Colombo, and he's a chartered engineer by profession. He has a long experience in the key subject areas of renewable energy management, and in particular energy policy and planning, where he's one of the instrumental personalities of the prevailing introducing the prevailing energy policy of Sri Lanka, national energy policy and strategies of 2019, and also he was again one of the key personalities in the establishment procedures of the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority, where he's the acting Director General as of today. So with that brief introduction, I am very much honored to invite Mr. Harsha Wickramasinghe to take the floor for the SLEMA Annual Sessions 2022 now. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I think, can you see me and hear me well?
Yes, Mr. Harsha.
Yes. I'm Bowen, and a very great good morning, beautiful weather here in Colombo, in Sri Lanka. And as mentioned by our President, Mr. Chamala Jayasekara, we are dealing with a very important subject. And I, as a promoter of non-fossil fuel based transport systems for the last 20 years, I had my keen bets placed on battery electric vehicles for quite some time, and I saw hydrogen as a very distant dream, and maybe it will never be a feasible solution for our part of the world. But things have changed drastically, and I think one fine day we will find the importance of green hydrogen because as a renewable energy rich country with solar and wind energy thrown in to a good measure, I think we have a very good state. We can start this process the sooner the better. And you may be not aware for the benefit of the participants from other countries. Let me give you a brief background to our present economic crisis. It is actually deep-rooted in the transport energy, the way we use our transport energy. We spend around 10 million US dollars on fuel every day, and out of that, about 6 million is wasted on mostly private transport, because we have not sorted out our public transport system. But saying that, if we can generate this much revenue or the economy size of a business, $6 million a day, our country can look forward to a better future. So with that, let me briefly introduce the eminent panel we have today. For the keynote speech, we have Mr. Dan Brian Millison, the manager from, he's a manager from Transcendergy LLC, and a consultant to the Asian Development Bank. A warm welcome to Mr. Millison. And we have Sturle Harald Pedersen, the managing director of Greenstat Norway, and chairman of the board of Greenstat Hydrogen India Private Limited. So a warm welcome to Mr. Pedersen as well. And then we have our own Mr. Nimal Pereira, past president of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association, actually the live wire behind all our efforts in green hydrogen in our country, and especially within SLEMA. He will continuously trouble me during my presidency to do something about green hydrogen. Sadly, we were having a very bad patch during the COVID times, so we couldn't do much, but he didn't give up. So a warm welcome to Mr. Nimal Pereira as well. And then we have Mr. Sali Vikramasuriya, long-term friend of SLEMA. We have invited him for so many SLEMA sessions, and here he's today talking to us on green hydrogen. He's the chairman of Sri Lanka Petroleum Development Authority, and a warm welcome to you, sir, Mr. Sali Vikramasuriya as well. Then we have Professor Ajit Jalvis. He's a senior professor of the Chemical and Process Engineering Department of the University of Moratuwa, and he's also the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies of the same university. And he's no stranger to Sri Lankan audiences. He's an eminent exponent of biogas and all things green in our country. So with that, we can move on to the sessions proper. And I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to all our participants as well, who are members, associate members, and even non-members from all over the world, especially Sri Lanka. A warm welcome to our sessions today. And we take this opportunity to invite you to stay with us till the end of the session. You will know what is in store for us in the green future of our country and in the world as well. So without taking any more of your time, let me invite Mr. Millison. Can we have his introduction slide? Mr. Parenbura? Yes. The keynote speech today titled Green Hydrogen Opportunities and Challenges. Can we have the introductory slide, please? Again? Mr. Millicent, can you please stop share? Then I can. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes. Loshan, can we have the introduction slide, Mr. Millicent, once again? Yes. Okay. So, green hydrogen opportunities and challenges for Sri Lanka. Mr. Dan Brian Millicent, manager of Trans-Energy LLC, is a manager of this Trans-Energy LLC, a private consulting firm established in 2008. And he has 35 plus years in professional experience, including 20 years working on sustainable infrastructure development programs. And as a consultant, former project officer at the Asian Development Bank, he has mobilized more than $10 billion in investments, more than 1 billion co-financing from the climate investment funds and the Green Climate Fund in clean energy, sustainable transport, and other climate-friendly technologies. So he's currently supporting ADB's technical programs, innovative, high-impact technology, energy sector, and climate change operations. And Mr. Millicent has an undergraduate degree in geological sciences and a master's in civil engineering, both from the Northwestern University in the United States. Mr. Millicent, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. It's nice to be here, and I'll share my screen here. Hang on, let me get to the right one. And I was Priyanta Wijayatunga, who's the head of the Asian Development Bank, he's the chief of the energy sector group at Asian Development Bank, was going to do this presentation, but he was not available today. He's committed to some meetings with ADB's management and board, so he asked me to stand in for him, and very happy to be here. And I hope you can see the screen okay, and hear me okay. I'll quickly go through. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, but one point I want to make here, don't forget the oxygen is the subtitle. And it's because the green hydrogen economy, it's not just protons. There's a lot to it, like the existing hydrogen economy. Today, the global market, it's about 100 million tons a year. Most of this is used in petroleum refining and ammonia production, other fertilizer production, other chemical manufacturing, including things like methanol. And we are now looking at hydrogen as a new energy carrier or energy vector. And there are different colors. Most of these are not really going to happen, or we're going to phase out gray hydrogen, we're going to phase in green hydrogen. There might be a little pink, there might be a little turquoise, but I'm going to talk about green hydrogen because I think that's where the big growth is going to be. IEA, International Energy Agency, has been looking at this, and their track record in doing forecasting is not stellar. They're showing maybe 9 million tons per year of green hydrogen by 2030. That I think we might see more than that. It depends who you ask. But the things we will see green hydrogen for are the hard to decarbonize sectors like iron and steel. And I think we'll see quite a bit of use of ammonia and methanol, including as alternative fuels in transport, and especially in marine transport. We're already starting to see this. ADB's work, hydrogen is like other clean energy activities. ADB supports knowledge sharing and government policy development. We've been doing some analysis on hydrogen evolution and looking at creation of hydrogen hubs, trading platforms, looking at potential pilot or prototype projects to do demonstration work and that can be quickly scaled up. And ADB's main role is to finance projects, and we are, ADB has already done a couple of projects in China where there are relatively small components for hydrogen's fuel cell buses in some Chinese urban development projects. And I'll talk a bit more about what kind of things we might see come into ADB's financing program later. For the last few years, we've been involved in various kinds of workshops around Asia and looking at different hydrogen market assessments in specific countries, looking at the international supply chain, the potential for hydrogen trading and hydrogen transport, trading hubs, as I mentioned. Hydrogen in some ways looks a lot like traditional liquefied natural gas markets. We see potential opportunities to mobilize private capital to get the scale necessary that we're talking about to make a difference in the global greenhouse gas equation. There will have to be a lot of private capital. So we've got various knowledge products in the works, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this bottom point there about using renewable offshore renewable energy and converting that to hydrogen and then other products. Just to give you a sense of some of the work we've done, we've supported a study for green hydrogen in Pakistan. The prospect there is to use surplus hydropower output to make green hydrogen. And we look at, the approach is generally to look at different use cases. And specifically in Pakistan, there is a well-established national natural gas network of, with pipelines and power generation plants and some domestic production of natural gas. Pakistan imports natural gas. The idea is, can we produce green hydrogen instead of importing gas and other petroleum fuels? We've concluded this study, but we haven't gone on to any follow-on investments yet. We are also looking at innovative technology, and some of you are probably familiar with this. There's an idea of using aluminum and reacting with water and using that to actually produce hydrogen. And there's some pretty interesting work going on in the waste to energy sector where we can be recovering aluminum cans from municipal solid waste streams and then using those as an actual transport fuel. Let me shift a little bit in the discussion here. In general, when we're talking about energy, for a long time we've been on this path where we're relying on fossil fuels, and there's a notion that renewable energy is too expensive. I think we know different today, and one reason to think about renewable energy is to think about predictable cost and price of renewable energy production. Just looking at global crude oil prices, we had an extraordinary period of stability from the end of World War II until 1973. And since October of 1973, the name of the game in crude oil prices is volatility. There was a relatively stable period, if you will, from the mid-'80s to the late 1990s. But again, since, really in the last 20 years, we've seen huge swings, including the 2008, and then dropping down to negative pricing briefly in about a little over 2 years ago. So the uncertainty associated with price volatility is one of the reasons to move to renewable energy in general, and one of the reasons specifically to look at green hydrogen. Now, we're talking, when we talk about green hydrogen, we're mostly talking about a $2 per kilogram price target. And that $2 per kilogram is really linked to gray hydrogen produced from natural gas at $6 per million BTU. Now, globally today, natural gas prices are not set globally. They're set in regional markets, as you can see here on this graph. Now, if we're trying to make green hydrogen for $2, and we have to compete at $2 per kilogram in the United States, today, that's a pretty tall order. But if we're trying to compete against gray hydrogen based on LNG spot prices, or if we're trying to do this in Europe, then we have a much different picture here. Because of the increase in natural gas prices in Europe during the last year plus, and especially since the first of this year, we see that the gray hydrogen is much more expensive than green hydrogen. So the notion that green hydrogen is too expensive, you have to ask, where exactly are we talking about? Because the development, some of the development that we're seeing in Europe, specifically in Spain, the cost of production is around $3.50 per kilogram of hydrogen, versus today something on the order of 6, 7, 8 or higher per kilogram for gray hydrogen. So to look at the main factors that dictate the cost of production, and you've probably seen these graphs before. On the vertical axis, we have the cost of hydrogen in dollars per kilogram, and we're looking for this $2 per kilogram as our target price. If on the left side, if we fix the electricity price at $40 per megawatt hour, 4 cents US per kilowatt hour, then you can see different cost curves depending on the capex of the electrolyzers. On the right side, if we fix the capex of the electrolyzers at $450, which is a benchmark that we're hearing from the electrolyzer industry, then we can look at the cost of production based on electricity cost versus the load hours of electrolyzers. Now, let's translate this into actual energy markets. And as I said before, if you're trying to produce green hydrogen at par with gray hydrogen, you have to ask, where are we trying to do that? So if we're in the Iberian Peninsula, for example, on the left side there, that green spot, that's solar and wind mix producing green hydrogen in Spain, where we've got the electrolyzer running for maybe 3,000 hours per year. And we're seeing a cost of hydrogen of around $3.50 per kilogram. And the electricity price of that solar and wind mix is definitely below $40 per megawatt hour. In Indonesia, the national oil company is doing some assessment of hydrogen from geothermal. They have plants that are fully amortized. The cost of electricity is definitely lower than $40 per megawatt hour. And they're looking at being able to run at least 7,000 hours a year. If we look at other markets like in Saudi Arabia, solar PPAs, or even Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, we've got electricity coming in at less than $40 per megawatt hour, electrolyzers running at 2,000 hours a year. Hydrogen looks like we can make it for about $3 per kilogram. And in the North Sea, we're getting electricity offtake prices as low as $50 per megawatt hour. And with offshore wind, we're seeing load factors as high as 50% capacity utilization factor. So keeping that in view, then one of the big hydrogen hubs that we see emerging in the last couple of years is in the EU North Sea area, where we've got gigawatt scale development. Green hydrogen is going to displace gray hydrogen in the existing markets, refining, chemical manufacturing, hydrogen blending in existing gas pipelines. And what I would emphasize about this particular region is that there are now new projects being built where we're going to have offshore wind dedicated to hydrogen production without any electric transmission connection onshore. It's going to be directly electrons to protons. And then what you do with the protons, we'll see, but there's no electricity power purchase agreement on some of these projects. So I would encourage you to keep this in mind, that when we talk about green hydrogen, we don't need to have an electricity PPA. Now, offshore wind, why do we care about going offshore? One, for scale. The other is that when we plant big structures in the seawater, marine life tends to grow on them. And this is a picture from wind turbines installed offshore Virginia in the United States. There are 2 prototype 6 megawatt turbines that are there as the initial operation for a 5,200 megawatt wind farm development. And this is what grew on the structures in 18 months without any attempt to encourage the marine growth. So we can look at we can look at this, keep this in mind, because this happens everywhere in the Gulf of Mexico, in the North Sea. And why is it important for Sri Lanka? Because 89% of Sri Lanka's territory is exclusive economic zone. Sri Lanka is really an ocean economy. So don't look on land, forget about power purchase agreements for a bit, and think about the sea, where you have really big, extraordinary potential to scale up to gigawatt and terawatt scale. Now, green hydrogen is interesting in this global context, especially if we go offshore, where we can get the gigawatt scale. And when we make hydrogen instead of electrons, we know how to time shift electrons, and we know how to location shift electrons. But hydrogen is a lot easier to location shift and time shift indefinitely compared to electricity. So we're looking at, under a regional technical assistance that we've developed, we're looking at different business models where we're using electricity from offshore renewable energy to make hydrogen and alternative fuels, and then co-locate aquaculture and maybe ecotourism. And we call this marine aquaculture, reefs, renewable energy, and ecotourism for ecosystem services, also known as MARES, Latin for seas. And to give a sense of what this is, how would these pieces put together? These are all things that have been done before and are being done, but they tend to be done in isolation or in sequence and not co-located in parallel. Now, but what are we talking about? We're talking about using the vast offshore renewable energy potential and monetizing that with hydrogen, green hydrogen, as a key enabler of a shift from linear extractive economy to circular regenerative economy, and especially creating natural capital in the oceans, preserving ocean health, and improving ocean health. Now, we have a really good case story, if you will, from the Gulf of Mexico in the United States, where for 35 years, we've had a program for rigs to reef. So like the picture I showed you before, we plant these big structures in seawater and marine life grows on them. And this is very well documented in the Gulf of Mexico and in offshore California. And in the Gulf of Mexico, we've got more than 550 offshore former oil and gas production facilities that have been left in the water as cultivated reefs. And these are supporting commercial sport diving, sport fishing, and regional seafood production in the Gulf of Mexico. That was not there 35 years ago. Offshore California, we've had 50 years to study the environmental impact. And there's no mystery about what's going on. The rigs offshore California support more marine life than the marine protected areas offshore California. And there may not be many offshore oil and gas rigs in Sri Lanka, but we're looking at trying to do a program in Southeast Asia where we would have at least 100 candidates to leave in the water, and maybe more like 200. So just to give you a picture of what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico, the oil and gas rigs, the red and black dots, that's, in the Western Gulf, that's where those 500 plus oil and gas structures have been left in the water as reefs. And then the eastern side, the red dots, those are mostly ships that have been sunk on purpose to be reefs. So if you wanted to do a rig to reef program in Sri Lanka, you don't have many rigs, but you could think about doing a wreck to reef program. The case studies that we're looking at under this MARES TA, it's power to X. So we use offshore renewable energy to make electricity. We use the electricity to make green hydrogen. We have hydrogen, we have an oxygen byproduct. We're mainly looking at how to use the hydrogen to make ammonia, methanol, ethanol, other chemicals. And we could also be looking at doing rig to reef and wreck to reef programs, cleaner marine transport, eventually cleaner aviation fuels. And we're still at a research stage, if you will, in this technical assistance, but the lessons learned can certainly be adapted in Sri Lanka. Now, when I mentioned scale and the gigawatt and terawatt scale, so what are we actually talking about here? If we use 1% of the area of the exclusive economic zones in ADB's developing member countries, and if we do renewable energy at 50 megawatts per kilometer squared, running at 16% capacity factor, now that's solar, that's floating solar. We convert that at 50 megawatt hours per ton of hydrogen, we would be making a lot more hydrogen than the global market today. And at $2 per kilogram revenue, this would be $1 trillion per year industry. The electricity output by itself would be equal to today's global electricity output. And we would be able to displace about 40% of global natural gas in theory and avoid around 5 billion tons per year of CO2, which is about 10% of global CO2 emissions projected in 2030. Where is Sri Lanka in this? Well, Sri Lanka's total energy consumption, electricity and everything else, is about 108 terawatt hours per year. And if we did this 1% of the offshore area with floating solar, we'd be able to do more than 3 times that total energy production in the form of green hydrogen. If we could sell that at $2 per kilogram, we'd be making $15 billion a year, which is more than 18% of Sri Lanka's GDP in 2019. Now, this is not easy to get there, but these are the numbers that give you some understanding of why there's so much buzz about green hydrogen and the interest in green hydrogen. It's mainly because of the potential for scale. Now, okay, marine solar to go out in the open ocean, we're not actually there yet. We can do marine solar where the wave height is 2 or 3 meters max, but we know how to do offshore wind in the high seas, as proven in the North Sea for several years now. So Sri Lanka has great wind resources onshore and offshore, especially the northwest coast and the southeast coast. If we took 1% of the EEZ area of Sri Lanka and did wind at 10 megawatts per kilometer square at 50% capacity factor, which is what we see routinely with offshore wind in the North Sea, and we convert at 50 megawatt hours per ton, we'd be doing 230 plus terawatt hours a year versus the 100 plus terawatt hours per year total energy consumption today. And that revenue, if that's $2 per kilogram of hydrogen, that would be more than $9 billion a year. That'd be 10% of 2019 GDP. So there's nothing really holding you back from a technical perspective. You know, we're talking about off-the-shelf technology here. Nothing needs to be invented to go out and convert this offshore wind resource hydrogen. It's whether or not we have to start with a price of $2 per kilogram, or if we can start with a higher price and work our way down. And if we look at the traditional LNG export projects traditionally have been anchored with a price formula and a long-term offtake agreement, a price formula linked to crude oil prices and not a fixed price dollar per ton of LNG. We can also look to the India Solar Parks program as an example of how do you get started on this when you know that the first projects are going to cost more, but that you have a predictable cost decline or learning rate associated with the expansion. Now, as I mentioned before, when we plant these big structures offshore, marine life grows on them. So we can co-locate marine aquaculture. And one of the things that we could do would actually be to grow seaweed. Now, Sri Lanka, the government a year or two ago decreed no more petroleum-based fertilizer imports, and that had a pretty dramatic effect on the agricultural sector in Sri Lanka. Well, if that decree had been preceded by a couple of years of using seaweed, scaling up seaweed production to use seaweed as organic fertilizer, things might be a lot better today. It's not too late to do this. If we go offshore to make hydrogen from offshore renewable energy, we can co-locate seaweed and other aquaculture. And just to give you an idea, if we were able to produce seaweed and sell it at a median wholesale price of $250 per ton, that would be another $1 billion plus per year just in Sri Lanka. And if we want to think about that just in terms of carbon dioxide removal, where we're removing CO2 from seawater, and this is a real reduction, not a hypothetical offset against future growth in emissions, but actual carbon dioxide removal. If we were able to take that same amount of seaweed and just do CO2 disposal in the deep ocean and sell the carbon credits for $50 a ton, that would be about a billion tons of CO2 per year, and it would be about $1 billion of well, it'd be in Sri Lanka, it'd be about $900 plus million a year. And I apologize, I think I might have mixed up that total. That 1.1 billion tons of CO2 per year is not just for Sri Lanka. That's for the whole region there. Now, so if we do this co-location of green hydrogen and marine aquaculture, and we can also do reef cultivation, we can encourage the growth of coral on those offshore structures that produce the renewable energy and hydrogen. And now we're not trying to sell green hydrogen. We have a different brand that I call regenerative hydrogen, because we're making hydrogen, sure, but we're also helping grow reefs. We're growing seafood. We can develop tourism industry. There's already sport fishing boats going out to those wind turbines offshore of Virginia. Why? Because that's where big fish are and they're easy to find. So it's not just green hydrogen. Think about regenerative hydrogen. We're not selling electricity. We're selling all of these products, and we have a much higher value addition than if we're just trying to do renewable electricity in the onshore grid. Now, how can we finance this at scale? This is ADB's job as a bank, and we know how to do this. And actually, we have a great example to look at in Sri Lanka, where ADB has been helping finance a rooftop solar program for the past several years with a financial intermediation loan through the Ministry of Finance. ADB provides a wholesale financing, and that money is passed on to partner financial institutions that do retail loans for rooftop solar. And that RSGP website, you can go there to find more information. This is a fairly straightforward way that we could take this basic financing model and do a green hydrogen program that could include onshore, offshore, all the other complementary marine aquaculture, whatever. We know how to do this and mobilize commercial co-financing and maybe concessional co-financing. If the government wants to do this and asks ADB to do it, it's pretty hard for ADB to say no. So don't forget the oxygen. I've sat through a bunch of green hydrogen seminars in the last year, and no one ever mentions oxygen. But when you do electrolysis, for each unit of hydrogen, we get 8 units of oxygen. And oxygen is important because a typical person can't live without it for more than about 3 minutes. And I would note, half of the oxygen or more in the atmosphere is coming from the ocean. So there's a compelling reason to look at offshore renewable energy as the basis for a gigawatt scale green hydrogen program in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. And just in closing, I would emphasize the need to transition off of fossil fuels. The notion that we need fossil fuel because they're cheap and affordable, I think in Sri Lanka today, we've learned that is not the case. Now, getting off fossil fuel and getting onto an affordable clean energy system is a difficult transition, but we have to do it. The resources are there, and ADB is ready to help with the transition. We like to say there's money for the project if there's a project for the money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millicent. And it was a very important session. The keynote address, we learned many things and what is in store for Sri Lanka and the whole world. It is absolutely stunning numbers you shared with us. Most of these numbers are quite new to our audience, and thank you very much for being very vocal in this journey. I think we are in the just about to begin a whole new era in renewable energy development and the energy vector. So until this point, I was under the impression electricity is the most versatile energy vector available in the world. But now I have made strong doubts whether it is the case. It could very well be the hydrogen vector, emerging vector, which will take the world forward. So we had one question from Professor Rahul Atalage, whether, just let me repeat his question, how well the best practiced technologies of proton transportation yet from safety perspective. So it's asking how the safety aspect, whether we are ready to do the large-scale transportation of hydrogen. Yes, Mr. Millicent has answered it in the chat box, but you can speak up, Mr. Millicent, if you wish to.
Sure. I would just say, you know, there is this existing gray hydrogen industry, and most of the industrial operations, the safety standards and technical standards for how to produce and use hydrogen are there already. So what's, what we're, there's still a little bit of a learning curve about just making hydrogen from electricity and water. In my opinion, it's actually much safer and much easier to do electrolysis rather than the chemical conversion of natural gas to hydrogen. That's my own opinion. If we're looking at transport and we're trying to transport liquefied hydrogen, we can take our cues from the existing liquefied natural gas business, more than 50 years of experience without a catastrophic accident involving LNG tankers. So trying to ship liquefied hydrogen by tanker is pretty challenging. It's much easier, I think, to convert hydrogen to methanol or ammonia and transport that, where we've got existing supply chains. And the other sector where what we're seeing in Western Europe is, and other places, is blending hydrogen in existing natural gas pipelines. Up to 5–10% blend by volume, there's no need to modify the pipeline systems, and might be able to go about 20% higher. If we want to do 100% hydrogen by pipeline, we have to do a real retrofit on the pipeline network or build new dedicated pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millicent. And there are some more questions, but we will retain those for the end of the session. And also, you can respond to these questions by entering text in the Q&A. Because of the interest of time, we will move ahead. We have the next, and before taking leave on a lighter vein, I'm an avid reader of the comic book Tintin, and the first time I saw the real barnacles, Captain Haddock could say billions of blue blistering barnacles. And thank you, Mr. Millicent, for showing us photographs of these barnacles. Okay, so moving on, we have the pleasure of having Mr. Nimal Pereira. Let me see. Mr. Nimal Pereira is no stranger to us Sri Lankans in the energy sector. He's a past president of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association and a strong advocate of green hydrogen. He's the convener and co-chair of the Green Hydrogen Working Group of the Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. Mr. Pereira is recognized with a special award, Environmental Achievement Award by the United States Asia Environmental Partnership Program, USAEP, in 2006, and holds more than 30 years of field experience. He is currently engaged as a national consultant in the field of energy, environment, climate change, and sustainable development. He is a graduate from University of Colombo in 1983, and later earned his postgraduate qualifications in industrial engineering, business and financial administration, pollution control engineering, industrial waste management, and energy efficient use of energy in industry from local and overseas universities and many institutions. And he's, as I've told you, he's a past president of SLEMA and a presently serving board member. And he's also a member of the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science SLAS, Institute of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka, and GH2 Management Institute USA. And he's an expert trainer and facilitator in the fields of energy management, environmental management, sustainability, sustainable development, cleaner production, green sustainable productivity, sustainable consumption and production (SCP), climate change, and GHG and carbon accounting, etc. So without taking any more of your time, over to you, Mr. Nimal Pereira.
Thank you, Harsha, for your kind introduction. Could you, just a moment. Okay, again, thank you very much, Harsha, for your kind introduction, and also Mr. Millicent, Dan Millicent, you have already set up the platform for my presentation. And of course, I'm the most happiest person in this forum today. It's none other reason because this is something, a kind of a dream I had in my past. Always I was thinking about how to establish a green energy field in Sri Lanka. So on that thought, I already made a proposal to my SLEMA board to establish or develop a green hydrogen working group. And then my colleague, Professor Rahul Athalage, he came into front to work with me. And today, the first, the initiative, the thought initiative has come out. So I'm very happy. I'm sure this will lead to a lot of deliberations in the country, especially when as we are currently, facing a lot of difficulties with the energy crisis. Gas, it may be fuel, everything, and also the power sector. In that case, I'm sure that the future, maybe another at least 10 years or maybe 15 years time, maybe I may be not living, but at least my the future generations will entertain the benefit of what we are initiating today. And of course, I'm very happy the last presentation, the last presenter, Mr. Vikram Surya, will talk about the national initiative the government has taken. So I am sure that the Green Hydrogen Working Group and also especially this annual session, the deliberation what we are making through this annual sessions will be a very good catalyst to our future activities in Sri Lanka. Having said that, I will quickly go through my presentation. Of course, I was looking for a good person to talk about the international perspective of the current status of green hydrogen technologies, international perspective. But I couldn't find it because almost all these people, they were very interested to take different areas. But again, I am happy because will give a kind of a opportunity for me to talk about what we are entertaining today, what we are, how we are happening, how we are moving today with the global environment. So with that perspective, I tried to gather a lot of information from from my surrounding world. And of course, I had collected a lot of information. But my major difficulty was how to give a kind of a overall horizon or a picture of this one. Because when I tried to collect some information, maybe last week, when I visit the same website and try to find the new, kind of international perspective, it is almost changed because it's very rapidly changing, especially with this green hydrogen technology. I'm sure there are a lot of very high rate changing environment in the world. But again, I try to make some kind of a moderate kind of a set of information, sharing with you all. I'm sure maybe when I come to the next week, this will be not the same which I have already shared with you all. And also I am very much thankful to two of my colleagues who are supported through our Green Hydrogen Working Group, representing the two private sector organizations, Ceylon Oxygen and DEMO, who are representing Siemens Energy, and also the Linde in Sri Lanka. They have given me some kind of a good thought of information to share with you all in this presentation. So I think it's worth to give a kind of a historical background of hydrogen, some few milestones to share with you all, as all these are basically international cases. According to my search, what I found is the first identification of hydrogen is as an element by British scientist Henry Cavendish, thanks for him, by reacting a zinc metal with hydrochloric acid. Somewhere happened somewhere in 1776. That gives me a kind of a thought back to my childhood, where we used to react the caustic soda and the aluminium foil in a bottle, and then fill the gas with the balloon filling with this resulting gas. And then again, I used to make this gas as a kind of a source of welding flame as well during my childhood. So all these were actually some of the very interesting cases for me to think about this particular subject. And then again, 1788, the hydrogen was perfectly named. And then year 1800, again,
Mr. Nimal, sorry to disturb. Will you be able to put on slideshow?
I'm on the slideshow. Why can't you all, can't the others see the?
No, not yet. It's not in the slideshow mode. I believe.
Just a moment, sorry about it. I thought it's on the slideshow. Can you see my screen now?
Screen, yes.
Can you? Presentation mode? Am I on the presentation mode now?
No,
No,
I
sir,
don't.
not yet.
I don't think.
How about now?
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Nimal.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Then 1800, the discovery of electrolysis, the process which is very important in this green hydrogen process. And in 1838, the fuel cell effect was again invented. These are some of the key milestones. And other than that, from 1845 to date, like further development of the fuel cell, which we need very, one of the very crucial equipment in this the transport sector, especially in the transport sector and the energy, the power transformation, and use of hydrogen as a fuel, use as a rocket fuel in and trials for transportation, introduction of hydrogen economy, development of fuel cell vehicle, very important milestone in the transport sector, and the development of hydrogen related research organization, including in the International Energy Agency. So those are some of the key milestones, including the solar powered hydrogen production, which we are talking today. That is about the green hydrogen. And very importantly, the first fuel cell car, something called NE-car. NE-car means it's basically called New Energy Car, a demonstration by Daimler-Benz in 1994. And then the planning for national economies, national hydrogen economies. This was pioneered by the Iceland, plan to create a first hydrogen economy by 2030. And then the development of PEM fuel cells, polyhydroxide membrane fuel cells for automotive applications, and then multi-million-dollar commitments for hydrogen, especially for green hydrogen related development, and more and more countries are committing towards the green hydrogen economies. So these are the things what are happening around the world today. And today, the future vision, 2050 future vision will be, in the future, water will replace fossil fuels as the primary source of energy. Even this is something which we were never even thought about during our childhood. Hydrogen will be distributed via national networks of hydrogen transport pipelines and fueling stations. Today we can see we are entertaining only the fuel, what you call the liquid fuel distributing fuel stations. But in future, I'm sure even in Sri Lanka, maybe I'm expecting at least by 2025, we will have the first hydrogen fueling station, or it could be even before that. Hydrogen energy and fuel cell power will be clean, abundant, reliable, affordable, and an integral part of all sectors of economy especially in the US and all the other regions. When it comes to the other sectors like industry sector, that may be a very, very important component which we are thinking around. And these are some of the historic examples of, though I was talking about this milestone. And this is again something I picked up from the internet. The historic examples of large-scale electrolysis hydrogen production plants. It's from Norway, and then Canada, and then again Norway, two different places, and even in India, Peru, Egypt, and also from Zimbabwe. You can see these initiatives were taken place somewhere in 1929, 1939, 1953, and so on. So it means internationally there is a good kind of a initiative or some kind of a initial thoughts about this one. I am not very much sure what is the exact reason why they were planning for. I am sure it is not, it would be not mainly for the reason of energy transformation or the energy as a kind of an energy vector. They never had this developed those, maybe especially for the industrial purposes. But anyway, whatever said and done, those are some of the international thoughts what we had around the world. So what are the main stimulations or the stimulating forces for the green hydrogen? It's none other reason than the global resource scarcity, global warming and the climate change impacts which is happening around us, and the international commitments like Paris Accord or maybe the NDC targets to different countries, and also the sustainability threats, the threats to the sustainability, and then geopolitics in global energy supply chains. Especially when I had a small discussion with one group, what I told them was the Russia-Ukraine war has become a kind of a blessing to the green world. Is none other reason because of the hindrance of the fossil supplies from the Russian sides to the European countries. They have accelerate the production of green hydrogen and giving much more priorities to the hydrogen. So that from my personal point of thoughts, I think that is a good initiative for the world. It may be driven by the nature, right? As all of us are quite agreed, because everything is driven by the nature. So again, this could be a good reason to say that naturally the Russian, though it is a political case, this has been happened, and then based on that, based on that environment, geopolitical environment, the green hydrogen was further reinforced, and global communities there thinking more towards that direction. Of course, with the commitment from the climate change impact. So these are some of the global social voices for climate justice. I think you can imagine what was happening especially during the Glasgow COP, 26th COP. Global communities were very seriously voicing what they need in the world, especially to limit to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So that was a very good kind of a throttling kind of a pressure to the global community, especially to the Annex 1 countries or the developed countries, to take much more rigorous activities or take rigorous actions towards the development of green hydrogen. So this is actually, I'm not going to discuss with you all, because this is basically what we are talking about, the business as usual scenario, and talking about the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. If we are achieving, what should be our path, right? And then one of the very important thing which I heard during my follow with this COP26 outcomes. One thing I saw was, as a part of the Hydrogen Zero initiative launched at COP26, this particular organization, one of the Norwegian organizations, the Yara, who are providing the holding the major component. I would think about it's about nearly about 33% or 1/3 of the global ammonia production. They have already taken decision how to change their path. Nearly about 730 million tons per annum of carbon dioxide released to be compensated with green hydrogen. So there is I believe that's a very good initiative from the international perspective. So that's something which all these countries are moving towards, which for Sri Lanka also will have a good tail to pick up from that point and then move our energy sector towards this particular direction. And of course, when we are talking about the hydrogen, green hydrogen, the hydrogen value chain should not be forgot. There we are talking about hydrogen value chain, the production, storage and distribution, and then consumption or the application. And the common expert know-how needs are basically ensured safety. This was actually raised by one of the questions raised by everybody, and also now I think a couple of minutes back, Professor Atalagi raised this question about. And then, sorry, decreased cost. Of course, compared to the last 6 months back, now the cost has been very drastically reduced. I think the indications are being given by our colleague Dan has given a good picture of what's happening to the global hydrogen cost, especially the green hydrogen cost. Of course, now even I'm sure that the people who are involved with the energy sector, now they have realized even the solar PV based the electricity cost or the power cost, unit cost has come down even beyond the levels of coal-based power generation. So these are good environments, good surroundings for us to think about to bring our country also towards the green hydrogen economy, and guaranteed compliance with compliance with regulations, codes, and the standards and codes are very much required. So these are some of the needs in the country, especially when we are. This is one of the target of our green hydrogen SLEMA green hydrogen working group as well, because in SLEMA green hydrogen working group we have different directions we have already planned. One is giving a kind of a policy support to the government, and again awareness raising, this is the first best awareness session which we conduct from SLEMA on this green hydrogen. And then again, developing a business model. So that's why we have invited almost all the connected the private sector parties to come together. And also not only the private sector, even the public sector organizations, we have already invited them to hand in hand with Green Hydrogen Working Group and make the effort a success for our future generations. And again, when we are talking about, but I'm not going to discuss in detail, when we are talking about the hydrogen supply chain, there again we can demarcate the upstream, midstream, and also the downstream components, which I'm not going to discuss, but very much important for the green hydrogen sector is basically solar, or the what you call the renewable energy based hydrogen generation, and passing it through the supply chain or the value chain is the most important factor which we have taken into account. And also it's interested to see the expanding network of hydrogen trade routes, plans, and the agreements. So you can see most of these things are starting from the center towards the European side, and also they are diverting towards the other parts of the world as well. So very interesting. A lot of initiatives are being taken to adopt new trade routes and then plans and agreements for their global economic development. That I believe a good trend for the climate change impacts which we are facing today. I'm strongly believing that. And also in behind that, these are some of the global interest shown by different countries like China, Chile, Morocco, Cambodia. This is not according to the interest all these organizations made, sorry, the countries made, but in a nutshell, these are basically that kind of this thing. And because when it comes to the countries like Japan and South Korea, and also the countries like Norway, they have taken a lot of initiatives and very strong initiatives to promote the green hydrogen throughout the world. So so I handpicked 10 countries like who had given a good kind of contribution to the promotion of green hydrogen in the world. One of the countries, these are not based on the priority or the level of their interest, but alphabetical order. I thought it would be better, because otherwise this will be a very injustice if I make a mistake when I am addressing their industrial effort. Australia is being taken the first. Australia, actually, their effort on the what you call green hydrogen was almost very negligible. But very recently, I am sure that it's mainly after the COP26 and other the initiatives, they have taken multi-million dollars worth of projects to initiate a lot of green hydrogen related activities in their country. So these are some of the initiatives taken, which I'm not going to go through the list in detail, but Australia also had turned their faces heads towards the green hydrogen. It's a good sign. And of course, the Canada sees the potential in future green hydrogen markets, not just as a producer of gas, but based on abundant renewable sources, but also as a manufacturer of fuel cells. Because fuel cell is one of the key instrument in this hydrogen value chain. So in that case, the organizations taking initiatives for the development of more and more mass scale production of fuel cells will definitely reduce the cost of hydrogen generated by different countries. So these are some of the initiatives taken by the country Canada. The very interestingly, Ballard Power Systems made headlines in 2018 when Chinese conglomerate power invested about $163 million US, buying a 19.9% stake in their business. Good sign. These are some of the good thoughts, because I'm sure that these sort of initiatives done by the one country will make the other countries also stimulate to make much more investments towards this sort of directions. And again, when it comes to the country China, because China is very famous in the mass production. Because even, I'm sure that you all could remember, even when the solar cells, the solar arrays or the solar panels were having a very high, price, when especially the China came into the scene with mass scale production of solar PV panels, the price has drastically went down. The similar action, I'm sure, will happen to the PVs electrolyzers as well as the fuel cells in the future. The country's target, including 5,000 fuel cell vehicles by 2020 and 1 million by 2030. That is the end use part of the hydrogen. So these are some of the initiatives taken by China. And then France in June 2018, the minister has given a kind of a vows to make France a world leader in hydrogen. But unfortunately, because of leaving the office, made a drawback. But again, they have not given up the initiatives taken by the previous parties, but they are continuing it to the future. Then accordingly, the Alps region committed to euros 200 million towards 1,000 hydrogen vehicles and 15 electrolyzers to site. Just two recent examples of the progress. And again, I should not forget about the initiatives taken by the French company called Alstom to produce the hydrogen-driven train, which is operating in Germany, is one of the key thing in the transport, the key kind of a milestone which needs to be addressed in the green hydrogen sector.
Mr. Nimal Pereira, we have to speed things up a bit. Okay.
All right. Okay. And then Germany has taken a lot of initiatives from the European Union side. The Germany is one of the leading country. Several multi-million projects have been started. Of course, this is one of the places where I had a very good interest in observing how their green hydrogen operation is being happening. And then Japan is one of the very top level committed country towards the green hydrogen. And of course, the Norway, which has a lot of potentials to create hydrogen from hydropower, and that has been taken as a lead in the promotion of green hydrogen throughout the world. And of course, again, the South Korea, which again I had a experience. The first I had the experience of traveling on a green hydrogen, the hydrogen-driven motor vehicle, especially it's a passenger bus operated in Seoul City in South Korea. So that's again one kind of a stimulant factor which I had in my mind to set up something in Sri Lanka to take initiative through my association. And of course, the UK, though they were a little bit of lethargic in the initially, but now they have taken a lot of initiatives towards the green promotion of green hydrogen. And of course, the US also had taken a lot of initiatives to promote hydrogen, especially green hydrogen in the past. And very recently, I captured this one in the World Wide Web. Oman plans to build world largest green hydrogen plant. Oil-producing nations aims to plant powered by wind and solar energy to be full capacity by 2038. So the oil-rich countries, the OPEC countries who are producing oil, now they are turning their heads towards the hydrogen, especially towards green hydrogen. The India's commitment is very much appreciative because he's our big brother. The lithium batteries cannot, according to their statements, lithium batteries cannot store energy at a large scale, even though they are widely used to power electric vehicles. Very recently, I saw the directions given by the Prime Minister, give up higher priorities for green hydrogen. And India's government last year announced a national green hydrogen policy with a target of producing 5 million tons of fuel annually by 2030 in February. It provided the tax breaks, very important thing which we have to think about in our country as well, with a proper plan, and allotted land to set up plants to boost the investment. This is a statement given by Mukesh Ambani sees the green hydrogen cost coming down to about $1 per kilogram in 10 years. Of course, that is something we as a small country, what we are expecting is, even if we can go below the $1 per $1, that would be our expectation. So these are some of the green hydrogen leaders, especially from project owners' perspective and electrolyzer companies, as well as the main EPC companies. These are some of the initiatives, which I'm not going to go into detail. So these are their commitments, like 2,624 kilotons per annum of green hydrogen by CWP Global. So these are some of the project owner organizations. And again, electrolyzer companies, they have their targets towards the like the hydrogenics, nearly about 811 kilotons per annum. Likewise, different organizations, global organizations, they have taken the lead in making this one. They are especially, I want to talk about the Siemens Energy and Nel Hydrogen. They are very prominent in this particular subject. And finally, I would like to show a small video clip because this is the end use of green hydrogen. Okay, basically, this is something I want to share with you all. This is something I was expecting in our country as well. Now, these two trains are operating in Germany. And also, according to the information from Alstom, they have another, the orders for the bookings for another 22 sets of further machines from Germany. And my dream is one day, if our train structures, our railway system is also operating with this hydrogen and making a very comfortable transport sector in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for your patience, and sorry for not making a very comprehensive kind of a presentation on my topic, but based on the limited time period, I try to give the best justice to the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nimal Pereira. The next session will be delivered by Professor Ajidya Alvis. Can I have his introductory slide, please? Yes, Professor Ajidya Alvis, again, a no stranger to the sustainable energy sector of the country. He's a senior professor of chemical and process engineering at the University of Moratuwa and the Dean of Faculty of Graduate Studies as well, and the CIO, the Chief Innovation Officer, acting of the National Innovation Agency, the newly created Agency for Innovation. and he's got his PhD from the University of Cambridge, and worked at the University of Reading, UK, and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, before becoming the professor of chemical engineering. His experience includes serving as the science team leader in Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology and project director and coordinating secretary of the Science, Technology and Innovation, COSTI, the predecessor of this new agency, NIA. So Ministry of Science and Technology and Research, he had been quite involved, and he's a member of the Intellectual Property Advisory Commission of Sri Lanka and also a founder director of the Sri Lanka Green Building Council. His interests are innovation management, intellectual property, eco-innovations, food processing engineering, environmental engineering, nanobiotechnologies, bioenergy systems, and he's the founder president of Sri Lanka Biogas Association and a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, Sri Lanka. So it's my pleasure to invite Professor Ajit Alvis, our good friend, to deliver the next lecture of this session.
Thank you very much, Harsha. Thank you for the invitation, and I will knock off the video for the interest of bandwidth, I suppose, and stability. I will switch on my, try to share my slides. I hope visible as well as audible. So my task is to discuss about the state of affairs, not state of science, but state of affairs of hydrogen, green hydrogen in a local context, which is Sri Lankan context. Long way to go. Perhaps there are some lessons that we have to take from what we have done, and from when we listen to how the global situations developing. We listen to Brian and Nimal. Brian said this is something that on the ocean side, the opportunities that we have, and it appears that we are slow, we have been slow, and we have a serious crisis today of all sorts coming together. And anyway, the answer has to be again through technology. We have to work our way through. Now, what's interesting is most of the time when we speak of hydrogen, may be hearing about the transport or on the electricity or the user side, but we forget the industry, right? Industry is a serious user, and it has been so. It's just that it's not been green, but hydrogen has been really utilized. So you can see when you look at the global approaches, significant amount of hydrogen is used in ammonia, more than 55%. In the ammonia production, and that's what sustains life. That has led to what we call the green revolution. Availability of this inorganic nitrogen on soil enables us to produce more foods, and then subsequently we have a much more of a thriving population, right? The very, very famous Haber-Bosch process. And then of course methanol production, petroleum refining, and then there are other users like you can see with different industrial users. Of course, why rocket fuel in space? Because hydrogen has displayed the this energy density in mass-wise. No other fuel can compete with it. We will take hydrogen as a fuel energy carrier, but so we use energy to generate energy, and that's what hydrogen represents. However, it's been super useful. Even things like food processing, turning unsaturated fats to saturated fats for shelf life. I picked this up because that's something to do with Sri Lanka as well. Most of the other things we are not doing. We are not really been a serious user of hydrogen. In fact, we have even celebrated removing hydrogen from our industry at one go. So refinery probably is our only main user in a sense. It internally generates, it's used. It's the quantitative figure is about 10 tons when the refinery is running full steam. So we are not a major industrial user, and that's our problem because we do not have a significant industry in this country. That is our economic issue. right? That's why we are in this mess, because we have never really seriously worked on having an industry. And we always looking at the consumer side of it. The use is like generating electricity and watching TV, right? And we were looking more at the consumer side. So sitting in renewable energy, yes, it was mentioned. Sri Lanka has access to this. Now, onshore, forget the onshore, offshore was very seriously highlighted, the Brian's figures, the analysis. So renewable energy is seriously available to us. Then, of course, from where the hydrogen comes, I mean, it's water, right? Even if you take this offshore and the water and so on, we have this renewable resource, seriously. And the point is putting technology together to have this energy and then develop this resilient economy. So it's up to us, having realized the importance of this energy form, right? Are we ready, or do we have plans, and what are we doing? So we have seen the brand's color code was much more comprehensive, right? So we speak of brown, gray, green, and blue, and today the discussion is on green. And what we emphasize is, from an economy point, from a resilient economy point for Sri Lanka, it's a green hydrogen that's useful, because we're talking about renewable energy being plenty available, renewable resource being plenty available, and why not we look at this hydrogen economy? So it's there, but then of course we have to understand the technology gaps that we have been seeing and we are faced with. We must overcome those, and that is why we need a purposeful mission in arriving to that state. So if I do give a state of affairs, something I remember at early stage, the SLEMA president now, Chamila, having discussions from the CA, trying to put up the putting hydrogen into the map of the calculations, right? Okay, this direction, having a policy paper, having a white paper on hydrogen. He was constantly communicating, and he did it, and I'll come back to that just to highlight a few things. Today with SCA, we find energy storage systems. The hydrogen fuel cell is brought in, and they have it within their considerations of promotion or in the mandate. So you can see on the storage side. And we were teaching hydrogen economy. I was teaching hydrogen economy at the Sustainable Process Engineering way back when we started this master's program, because we were looking at process industry and the sustainability, and of course, hydrogen economy, like the ammonia economy and the methanol economy. We were talking about these different economies. They are interconnected, as you saw, with hydrogen can go into the methanol, and hydrogen very much can go into ammonia. And even ammonia as a transport fuel was way before described in Belgium after World War I. Almost as immediately after the ammonia process came the Haber brush, right? And national budgets in Sri Lanka has on and off mentioned hydrogen. We really do not know how the sentences come into the national budget, but we have seen this scenario being said. But what is unfortunately, the sentences have come in, but a targeted process subsequently from planning has not materialized. That's one of our problems, right? We say that we are going to do that, but we don't have a backup, or we don't really sustain our statements with action. So it remains on sentences. Of course, I put water to fuel inventors within brackets, of course, in this sense. We have had so much of publicity on this, and even government patronage at times on this. It's very interesting sometimes. This type of thing gains significant traction and even reaches the highest office in the country. While if you are on a research side and you say this is important, this is the step-by-step process to do, is not getting traction at all. So it's been somewhat unfortunate. So we have this roadmap for cleaner fuels and vehicles, came up in 2014 from the Ministry of Renewable and Environment. And so it's there, and it mentions about the need to go in this direction. Of course, industry use of hydrogen is, once you see the landscape in the country, it's marginal. I think more labs use hydrogen for instrumentation than industry use of hydrogen. This is one area that I mentioned. We had one industry which was looking at hydrogenation of fats, and for safety reasons, it not only stopped the process and even celebrated the off-taking the process from their practices. So it was seriously unfortunate. Now that you propagate the concept like we have huge safety issues with if I use this, and it's not something good, because as was mentioned, this area is, even though it's the hydrogen was not green, the standard practices, the industry has been really taking around significant quantities of this across, and in situ production, the use of this, it's all been there. And it's known, of course, that it was Hindenburg disaster Zeppelin that gives a kind of hydrogen a bad name, but subsequently it's identified as it may not have been the hydrogen that was the case of that Zeppelin disaster. Coming to recent CP sectional committee, that is Chemical and Process Engineering sectional committee, during COVID times, Tissa Lienage was keen with the committee, and with Mana wind system having extra electricity, extra probably capacity, why don't we go for this green hydrogen, plus of course the chemical industry using this capacity rather than directing electricity on the grid and doing something like what we normally do. So there was a with Dr. Tushara Subasinghe and a team of undergraduates coming in from Moratuwa, there was every week a discussion on this green hydrogen and how to make use of this and to push it. And one outcome of it is this paper for the moment, Economic Prosperity Through Renewable Hydrogen, the Sri Lankan text, which I believe is not yet published, but this was a sequence of events that was tried every week during COVID times. Of course, coming to projects, we have now a steel plant coming up. And I remember asking this question because COP26, as Nimal said, green steel was a big topic. And we asked, okay, we have given coal no-go in Sri Lanka, but then suddenly with the steel plant coming in, now we bring additional coal for industry. So that's running the old processes. But of course, green steel is quite recent in sense, but it's hot topic because again, another well-established Bessemer process may go out. We will not use coal or coke in that sense for removal of from the raw material, the oxygen, so hematite or the iron ore, but we will be using instead hydrogen. And if that hydrogen is tied to, of course, renewables, we have green steel. And of course, hydrogen in transport has been quite a lot discussed. So this is what Chamila and the SCA had. I hope this would be made more active, 2012. Roadmap for hydrogen production in Sri Lanka. What's interesting is 2021-22, the developer master plan is mentioned, and interesting in 22, operating a pilot scale plant is identified. So develop an integrated system, commercial scale operations, all the roadmap. And this is something SCA has done quite a number of roadmaps, and it's interesting to see a hydrogen roadmap is there at SCA, and it was done done some time back. So maybe to push this out again and position it, we must get into this type of activity and going beyond writing as well. So if I remember that hydrogen to water to fuel, you can see this. It happens in you can see it happens in 2008. Has huge promotion. Even the money was given by the government and so on. It's so unfortunate when sometimes the physics of the process or the chemistry of the process was mentioned. The media looks at very interestingly the non-science manner, the non-scientific manner. So these things surfaced, and not only common to Sri Lanka, it has happened in other places too. However, you know, it's possible in a way if you have the fuel cells and the hydrogen, but that hydrogen has to come from a different energy source. Otherwise, there's not going to be a perpetual energy systems to support this type of operation. Of course, something that happened in the interim. In 2012, there was this UNIDOR hydrogen entry to Sri Lanka that was mooted, and there was the signing of agreements and so on. What's interesting was Gold Fort being a heritage site. There was a saying, okay, emissions should not come, emissions should be avoided. And what was the identified technique? It was the green hydrogen powered three-wheelers. And so this whole program was mapped out with very ambitious in the sense of goals of, okay, we are going to get three-wheelers, it's going to be hydrogen powered, and they are going to save this heritage structure. It's quite interesting, all right? So, but where are we today, or what happened? So that's something of mystery still. And of course, what's interesting was that it was supposed to be from the Mahindras in India High Alpha. Of course, that's first hydrogen fuel three-wheeler. Did happen, it's all done, right? And it was very interesting. It's a UNIDO. UNIDO had in Istanbul or Turkey, the Hydrogen Research Center that was supporting. And of course, IIT Delhi figured in the development story. So this was the three-wheeler that was supposed to be coming. But the point is, what I'm more interested is the Indian operation and how they did it, because the private sector who is into, Mahindra is quite innovative. They have their innovative arm contesting John Deere on the tractor front. It's a very interesting case study in transportation from them. And they have come up with this. So the private sector entity took on that this is a pathway to go, and they developed. And then there was this university industry collaboration to come up. And of course, the global body, a UNIDO research center, has supported it. So you can see interesting development. Of course, another project that was to come up, what you see is the one of the largest dumps in this very closer to our University of Moratuwa, and the biogas unit, the waste to energy plant, what I called as a bio-waste to bioenergy plant that was to come up at Karodiana, was to have hydrogen. I know the discussions went in, and we were also going to partner university as a research point here. And this was to, hydrogen was to happen in Maldives as well simultaneously, because the private sector investor here was working with Maldives, and the hydrogen was more interest at the time to the Maldives. Unfortunately, the very specific champion passing away at a young age really put a stop to this development, which I think is a very serious, sad scenario, sad situation. And unfortunately, the dump still says, and the project is not to be seen, right? So this is what happens when sometimes you look at the rupee to dollar rate and take a decision and basically or totally based on that. And when nothing happens in the background, the rupee dollar ratio just goes down again, because we are not doing nothing to strengthen. The system is weak. So this is another project, and this is, of course, we are going to hear about it. So again, the most recently signed transportation project is this green hydrogen generating project in Sri Lanka from Greenstat. The Greenstat India is coming through, but it's linked to the mother company is, I believe, in Norway, and we have our next presentation. So I'm very keen to hear what's the story. But this is on the transportation side, and look forward to seeing something positive at last happening on the ground. That's important. So these are like the projects. We also had Linde, the Ceylon Oxygen, working with DEMO, but of course responding to government call. Remember I mentioned about the national budget, transportation, and few buses to run and so on. But sadly, there was, even though the projects came from the private sector to support, but nothing seems to have happened subsequently. So we see now a start of a fresh project, but to me, I look at it quite differently. It's not the way it should be, that we should be doing things differently. This should be part of it, that overall map. That's why I see the SCA hydrogen roadmap that was 2012, what Chamil has presented, is it's really important. And that should be the one that drives, and the national policy should drive it. Because you see, when you see things like this in 2005, when President Bush was pumping from the New York station to a hydrogen car of the GM, that demonstrates focused national commitment. So you look at what's going to happen, and you have your target, right? So you have this hydrogen energy earth chart. It's not earth chart of $1 hydrogen per kilogram in a decade. So you drive policy, you drive technology, you look at innovation, and you have this goal. So we know we are still way above this $1, right? As the economics were shown. This point is, you have this target, and then innovations bring these things within reach. We see energy costs tumbling, renewable energy unit cost, and these reasons come because there are inputs, and you don't take a decision knowing the price is high, no, we should not be doing anything here. The point is, knowing the prices are high, innovation is the process to go, the road to travel if you want to bring the prices down. I mean, that's what should be with us as well. And we should be a party in these operations rather than waiting to see the curve coming down in another country and then joining in, buying something and using it. That should not be the way. We should be part of the process of doing, because as I mentioned, we have the renewable energy, we have the renewable resource, and we have an economy that needs these things. And you can do that. I remember teaching about Iceland in the which was mentioned by Nimal, the first Icelandic one, the fishing fleet to be taken hydrogen, and they were targeting, of course, they were taking the heat route because they were using geothermal energy for the hydrogen generation. But that's what you are using, your competitive strengths that you have, and then developing technology around and changing your economy. So that should be the pathway, right? And I think the Brian's concept of talking about the oceans and then the connecting seaweeds is very important, because sometimes when our scenario is we do projects with one focus, one objective. If I want electricity, I only think of electricity. And most of the projects like that planning on, okay, with generate offshore wind or solar, in this case, the wind predominantly, and then plus seaweed never comes into our project concepts, right? We don't put in these two. It's not my area, or it's not my the area that I'm boss with. So we run on single purpose projects, and that's another reason that our projects don't the values are then we don't succeed, because if that fails, the whole thing's gone. So we see this national commit has to be there. So something that's seen recently, hydrogen fueling station, maybe about $1 to $2 million, I suppose, what was looking at Hawaiian cost. But you see, there's lots of science that one can go in, like even if you take electrolyzers, now we have moved from electrolyzers, industrial scale electrolyzers are around, but you have what is called the photocatalytic devices, photoelectrocatalytic cells are there. So integrated PV photocatalytic cells are there. So you have a whole range of stuff now we're talking. So there's a lot of opportunities in nanotechnology, material research, nanostructures, and then this how to split hydrogen is how to split water is a major research drive anyway, right? So you have the established electrolyzers, you have the emerging photoelectrocatalytic cells. And in this spectrum, so we can do quite a lot, and we should do, and we should have research working towards this, while we also work on scenarios like storage devices, the materials for storage, and then the other infrastructure. And it was mentioned blending hydrogen with CNG is happening. So I'll mention one thing that we need. There are two things. Don't forget the industry, and I think this is something Sri Lanka has to. A very interesting development is this breakthrough green ammonia production coming from Monash University in Australia. And this Professor McFarlane has always been thinking about, apparently, like, okay, water has hydrogen, environment has nitrogen. Why can't we just bring these two together and bring ammonia? And now this has happened, right? Through an electrochemical process, lithium coming from the electrolyte, and the lithium nitride, and then we have ammonia coming through. So we are now having an electrochemical process for green ammonia. That would be a major change, that step change. And you know, ammonia is so critical to food system and for humanity. And here we will have a modular small scale ammonia, really interesting area to work on by us as well to Sri Lanka, because this can have modular ammonia systems, because the Haber-Bosch process is like a $2 billion plus items. You know, it's not immediately going to happen, right? Having closed down the ammonia plant that we have, now we don't have the dollars maybe to do something else. So it has to come through innovation, and this is a very interesting Monash innovation that's come. Of course, we are now talking about the green steel, as I mentioned, about with hydrogen coming through to strip oxygen out of the iron ore rather than going the carbon route. And you know, you have from the old route, we are talking about 2 tons of carbon dioxide for 1 ton of steel. So everybody is today talking about decarbonization, and these processes will be really serious contributors. And why not we work in these areas, having this access? So we had to have technology development and trust, and bring that and put them together and talk, not only think of a service infrastructure, the services only. We must get the industry part right, the industry thing. And even with refinery, there's a chance for putting small projects to get that hydrogen and work on. It may not be immediately the green hydrogen, but polishing up the technologies. So directions to enter, I see as we need to get this SCA roadmap more of accepted, right? And then, as it's mentioned there, demonstration projects have to come in the selected sectors. We can't say we have a fuel cell car on the roads. We don't have, and as Nimal said about the dream of the hydrogen train, we must have a few things going, and every single meter travel has to be for supporting the data for the learning processes. We should really work on a green ammonia action plan, because ammonia can be an energy storage system in itself, because we speak of ammonia economy as well. And it's much better than the hydrogen in some sense, because it has its own more stability points and the storage aspects different. Green steel action plan may be something also to look into, but hydrogen R&D has to happen. But more so in the classical reform way, the steam reforming concept, we should really also work on the biogas hydrogen pathway, right? Because we have then it's also green hydrogen. And I don't think the biogas hydrogen pathway, that hydrogen, we can have a different color, maybe one, right? This would be a very interesting one, because transport, fuels, industry, all can come in. So like Prime Minister Modi has in India has done the National Hydrogen Mission, you need to have this mission embedded in the system, not just ad hoc projects just coming through. It's important that we position our plans better. Let me close with Jules Verne mentioned in his book long time back, in The Mysterious Island. Yes, my friends, I believe that the water will one day serve as our fuel, that the hydrogen, oxygen, which compose, will supply an inexhaustible source of heat and light. Believe that when the coal mines have been exhausted, we will both heat and be heated with water, and water is the coal of the future. Very interesting. Of course, we know Jules Verne is also into, so The Mysterious Island, why not Sri Lanka, right? Having the sun, having water, being a hydraulic, a pioneer in hydraulics, why don't we look at pioneering in some hydrogen economy as well, by taking some action, just not looking at the rupee value or the ROIs, because unless you do few things, you don't do that. So this is where the state has to take some very aggressive action by understanding the value of the road that you have to travel down the road. You have to take some action, and let's hope SLEMA and SCA on this will be able to push this agenda, because this is very much important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ajit Luis, especially for the concluding part. I really enjoyed it, the sayings of Jules Verne. So no doubt, there are so many mysterious things that are going on in our beautiful island. And presently, it has become a very interesting island rather than a mysterious island. But in future, let us hope your good wishes, all the participants, we can become a very hub of hydrogen economy in the world. Because of the interest of time, to catch up the lost time, we are planning to have the next presenter here. That is Mr. Sturle Harald Pedersen, to deliver his part of the sessions, and we will air the sponsor videos just after the conclusion of our Q&A session. So let me invite Mr. Sturle Pedersen to you, Mr. Pedersen.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for the short introduction. I will first say that I'm very pleased to be invited to this seminar. And I'm also very happy to hear about your organization's work and how you are trying to bring the different stakeholders together to discuss opportunities for Sri Lanka and to find good ways to move things forward, to improve the livelihood and the betterhood of the people and the nation. So I think that this organization the Sri Lankan Energy Manager Association play a very important role. And it will be even more important as we move forward in these challenging times for the nations, but also in a global scale. We see that there is a lot of challenges that affect all of us. So I think that many of the previous speakers have addressed many of the opportunities within the renewable energy sector, and what kind of impact it has for the different nations to have a safe and secure source of energy. So I will try to limit my presentation in these areas, and I will also focus on the commercial development perspective for Sri Lanka. But before I do that, I would just kind of short to tell who are Greenstat and what is Greenstat doing. Greenstat is a company that was initiated in 2015. For 4 to 5 decades, we were part of the Christian Michelsen Research Institute, which was founded by the first Prime Minister in Norway. And we have been working with hydrogen within the space program, NASA and the European Space Program. And it was for high temperature fuel cells, which is important systems for bringing us to the moon and beyond. And we have also been working with safety, which is one of the important areas, and where I disagree a little bit with Dan, who stated that we know a lot about hydrogen, and we have been using it for decades. So we shouldn't be too concerned about reinventing the wheel in this area, as compressed gases has been handled on a large scale for many decades. This is partly true, but actually the hydrogen, we know a lot, but there is also a lot of unknown. And that's why science and technology development will be an important area and success factor if we are going to scale up hydrogen, and hydrogen is going to be a key part of the energy mix in the future. And the prediction in this area is that green hydrogen / ammonia is going to be at about 20 to 25% of the energy mix globally. So the potential and the opportunities is huge. And why is that? Let us then go back to what we experience every day, the climate challenge, the climate changes that we see based upon humans' activities on Earth. This has, unfortunately, brought us to a point where we see that the weather conditions are changing. We see that we experience lack of water. We see that the food production is interrupted, and we see mitigations as well, because many of the areas are not livable anymore because of the increases in the temperature. This is a challenge that is something not one nation is facing. It is something that we who are living on Mother Earth is facing. So this is something that one company or one nation cannot solve by themselves. This is something that needs and will bring us together, because we need to find global solutions to these challenges. And green hydrogen that's why we say that this is a household name these days in the energy sector, to talk about how to scale up from fossil fuel to the renewable, and how hydrogen is going to be a key component in it. And don't know if there is a misconception about green hydrogen, but green hydrogen is mainly a storage medium. So it means that we can produce renewable. And as we know, the challenge is always to match the production with demand. And there is a lot of production that we cannot utilize at the peak hours. And that is the electricity, the protons that we will change to the molecules that by splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. But there is another component in this, depending on the technology that we are choosing, which is heat, which can also be used in process facilities and which will bring down the cost of producing hydrogen and make it much more competitive with existing fuel and fossil sources of energy. And which was pointed out also earlier by Dan and the Asian Development Bank. We see now that due to the political crisis and the wars going on, we see that gray hydrogen is not competitive anymore with green hydrogen, which will have a lower cost. But I will come back a little bit to these issues later if I have the opportunity, if time is not running out. It has been quite interesting to listen to the other speakers as well, because there is a lot of new information and there is a running development in many areas. So that's why it is also important to be able to share this knowledge, either it's in projects or in technologies or the pilot projects, which I would also address a little bit later, which is key for capacity building and so forth. So a little bit back to the topic to discuss. What is the key areas an investor would look at for investing into green hydrogen or green ammonia? First of all, I think that the largest challenge in most of the developing countries and in Asia is the lack of regulations and policies. As I mentioned earlier, the Greenstat is making a big presence in India, and we are working with Niti Aayog, who is responsible for the hydrogen mission and the policies in India. The difference between India and Sri Lanka is that India has a large consumption of hydrogen today. It's actually 6 million metric tons of hydrogen that are using in the refinery and the fertilizer industry, among others. So for that, the Indian government, it was easy for us to advise Indian authorities about what they should do to create a demand for hydrogen. That was a green procurement. It means that the government said to the industry that the next years you have to increase your consumption of existing hydrogen, which is gray hydrogen, with the release of CO2. You need to bring it down within the next 10 years. And there is mandatory to buy 10, 20, and the percentage is going up by every year. Then you would actually make it attractive for investors to build and invest in capacity, because they know that there is off-takers for green hydrogen. And the government's policies, when that is kind of pinpointed into the dates or years when things are going to be accomplished, creates certainty, which investors clearly are looking at. They want stability, they want to have a predictability, and they want to know what is regulated and what is up to the free market. I will also say that what is important for investors today is to make sure that there is sufficient renewable energy sources. So when you build the plants of production of hydrogen, it will be available renewable energy. So one of the opportunities, of course, for Sri Lanka is to either build more capacity. That will, of course, have its limitation over time. Sri Lanka is an island, so it's a limited space. I think that the project with the rooftop, the solar PV, excellent program. But if you want to turn kind of the fate and future of the country from being a big importer of energy to be a net exporter, and that should be the vision of the country. The country should really make a clear statement that we want to export X number in 2035, 2035 and 2045 and so on. So there is a target which is guiding the industry about what the government is going to participate and how they will develop a framework that can support these goals and objectives. So that will be very important for the government to participate. But it is another thing that some of the previous speakers have also mentioned, which is extremely important. We need to have more than one thought in our mind when we are developing the master plan and a roadmap for hydrogen. Today, I would say that as far as I know and what I've seen, there is no roadmap for Sri Lanka when it comes to the hydrogen, how to integrate or utilize hydrogen as a storage medium and as a export opportunities. So it is important that the government understand what they need to contribute, how to put in place regulations and policies, and extremely important to keep a focus on safety. I mentioned it a little bit before that Dan said that this is something that we know well, but the difference from how we are producing gray hydrogen today is that we do it in the industrial complex facility where we have a couple of hundred people who are interacting, but we are not storing hydrogen in big quantities. It is used as a feedstock into the refinery and into the fertilizer industry. It is not transported, outside these facilities or industrial parks, on the roads, on the vessels, to the filling stations where you have the exposure of not a couple of hundred people, but millions of people on a daily basis. So when we scale this up, there is a lot that we need to do. And I want to remind you as well, there has been accidents. One of them was pointed out in South Korea. Even in Norway, which is really having a focus on safety, we had an accident 2 years ago at one of the filling stations. No fatal outcome of it, but material, yes, large damages. And the result of it was that all filling stations, hydrogen filling stations in Norway, was closed for 2 years. That just shows what can happen when we don't focus on this part and make sure that we keep this under control. And as you all know, as engineers, risk is about frequency and the consequences. And with higher frequencies of filling and so forth, of course, the probability of outcome of an accident is increasing if we are not focusing on minimizing this risk and do what we can also to limit the consequences of the leakage and so forth. So this is renewable sources. I don't want to talk too much about it. I just want to say that Sri Lanka has 73 gigawatts potential on offshore, and that is a gift from God, because this has less impact than any wind park onshore. And as we mentioned earlier, your land is limited, but the conditions to set up wind parks in Sri Lanka is probably the best in the world, because the depth is about 25 to 35 meters, and you can build very competitive wind parks in Sri Lanka that will bring down the capex considerably compared to other countries and other projects around the world. In the North Sea, it's very expensive because of the depth is it is so deep that we cannot fix it to the ground, and we have to develop, floating devices and very advanced and costly constructions to build these wind parks. So Sri Lanka has a golden opportunity to develop very competitive wind parks and to use this electricity for domestic, for whatever you need, to convert from fossil to the electricity, and then take your surplus and convert it into the green hydrogen and to the ammonia, so you can transport it, have export terminals out of the country. And one of the things that also was mentioned here before was that the maritime sector is also growing, and I will comment on that in the end of this presentation. I don't believe in connecting to the grid. I believe that the grid is obsolete in 40, 50 years. I believe that the whole electricity distribution will be decentralized because of stability, and also because of the cost, and also by the fact that we are going to develop a complete new infrastructure. I just want to say that there is a possibility to upgrade the current infrastructure, so you don't need to actually develop a new network of piping and so forth. An upgrade is 10% of the cost of building a new one, so there is a way to also utilize existing network. I know that Sri Lanka doesn't have, but so you probably would have to start from the start, but there is other ways of distributing also hydrogen for the household as well. And there is many projects in the UK that is run by Equinor, a Norwegian energy company as well. I think that I have been mentioned about the national and international safety benchmark. I just want to say that in addition to the guiding and the support that we have given to the Indian government, we have set up Center of Excellence in Hydrogen and Process Safety with Indian Oil and with Serum Institute, and we have done it with IIT Delhi. These are capacity building institutions. They are working also on research and development. And I certainly would like to set up a Center of Excellence in Sri Lanka with the universities in Sri Lanka and link them into a hydrogen Center of Excellence cluster with India and other countries that is part of this network. Because I believe that this Center of Excellence is a great facilitator for both sharing technology, sharing knowledge and experience from different pilot projects as well. when it's coming to the, yes, I think that I have said enough about the wind. A little bit about the water, which is also one important ingredient. It is not 9 kilo, but it's 9 liter of the water that you need for producing 1 kilo of hydrogen. But an offshore solution could use seawater as well. The cost to do the conversion and is a little bit higher, but again, this is a scale of economy, and it is desalination is a very mature, how to say, technology, and again, in larger quantities, it's not an issue cost-wise. Just say a little bit about CAPEX. CAPEX is today quite high for the hydrogen, and everybody is talking about the CAPEX, how it will kind of go down year by year. And that is true because we are scaling up, and you would see the same as in solar PV. So we expect that the CAPEX cost will drop for electrolyzers, which is a kind of a key part of this, with the 20 to 30% a year in the next 5 years. So it means that the cost is going to be a rock bottom on these technologies. There is 4 mature technologies today, or I would say 3. That is alkaline, which has been the most mature, which Norway implemented in 1927. So it's almost 100 years. We have that experience for that, and some other countries even started in 1921 to run on this technology. And then we have the PEM technologies, which is a more newer development, membrane based. And then we have AEM, which is the new one and very promising. And we have also solid oxide, which is the most efficient, because you can then not only utilize the hydrogen and the oxygen, but you can also use the heat that you are generating as steam into it. But then it says something about how you are putting together your industrial parks, or how you are putting together the manufacturers and the off-takers is very important. Because 10% of the cost of hydrogen is transportation on average. But depending on where you are moving it and in which form, gaseous or in liquid forms, or as an ammonia, that would have an impact on it. We talked a little bit about that Sri Lanka doesn't have much of a consumption in hydrogen. But again, that is as a feedstock, but as a storage medium, Sri Lanka can also convert back to the electricity to fill the gap in the peak hours in the night, or whenever the peak hours are. But also the ambition of the government to be at the hub for international maritime traffic is also very important, to be able to supply, you know, the new fuel for the maritime sector, which is ammonia and other fossil-free fuels. There is many different combinations of it, but it is important that that is taking part in the infrastructure as well. And these net terminals have 2 purposes. One is to bring this out, but also to bring tankers to and traffic to the Sri Lanka, so you can earn from filling them up with self-produced green ammonia for as a maritime fuel. And the Norwegian shipping industry is already today been ordering new ships that has fuel systems, design systems that is both on battery and on hydrogen. And this is coming very, very quickly, because the maritime sector footprint is 2.5% of the total CO2. So they have a job to be done as well. So what is GreenSat going to do it in in Sri Lanka? Well, we are doing a feasibility studies to kind of get all the information updated, make sure that we see the gaps between what is of existing policies and regulations, particularly in the safety areas, and then we will propose what is needed to be implemented so the Sri Lanka can meet the best practices and the international standards for the handling green ammonia and green hydrogen. That will be it, you know, what investors expect, that you are meeting that standard. And then we will implement the pilot project, which will be a hydrogen corridor from south to north. And so we can use this pilot and showcase for technology involving universities and research institutions, experts, whoever who are taking interest and who want to participate in this important journey for Sri Lanka to be independent on energy and be a net exporter and bring hard currency to the countries that you can use for the building up your public welfare systems and infrastructure in so many areas that is needed. And also to make sure that the agencies that is, you know, looking at the applications for the green hydrogen and so forth, or doing inspections on the facilities for maintenance and so forth, that everyone is, you know, taking part in this journey. Because if you are building something and you don't have the engineers to kind of run and operate them, well, what is the use then? And this is a future not for the world, but it's for Sri Lanka. You have the, as it was pointed out earlier, you have the renewable resources and you should use them. And this should be your core competence. You should say that when investors are coming or people who want to come to Sri Lanka and share their technology, you should ask them and put as a condition almost that they have to teach you. So you can be brought up to the same level. When I say the same level, I mean to the latest knowledge and which is coming from these pilot projects, so you can take a lead on this. Why shouldn't Sri Lanka be the leading nation in renewables, in technology, in some of these areas? Of course, nobody can be champions in everything, but Sri Lanka should find an area where they say, this is the area where we are going to be the best in the world. And we have these resources that really, if they are utilized and if it's done correctly, will benefit this country and change the future for Sri Lanka in a dramatic way, positive way. So I hope by that, I will conclude and take questions. But I just have to say that I'm soon have to leave. So if you can take the questions quickly, then I will try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Pedersen, for that interesting presentation. And also, let me give a brief introduction to Mr. Pedersen now that we have a short profile from him. Rather, his partner here, Mr. Nimalpera, Mr. Pedersen is a Chief Executive Officer with more than 30 years global experience in leading successful business initiatives and ventures. So his extensive experience in leading and launching international government alliances and conducting negotiations, mergers and acquisitions, as well as securing funding and strategic partnerships with global industry partners and organizations. So serves today as board member, chairman in wide range of companies and organizations. So thank you, Mr. Sturle Herra Pedersen. I hope I got your name right. For that interesting initiative and the putting Sri Lanka on the hydrogen map of the world. I think there's a lot of hard work to be done here. And now that Mr. Pedersen is in a hurry to leave the session, we can take a quick couple of questions from the audience, if there are any. Let me see the Q&A. Yes, there are no questions in the Q&A, but if you need any to be answered, please raise hand. I can allow you to speak. Mr. Vidura Mendis, you have any question? Okay, Mr. Parakrama Jayasinghe, you can speak up.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Harsha. I'm most thankful for Mr. Pedersen for being most practical presentation and he made. You see, one point I would like to highlight what he mentioned is hydrogen is a source of storage. I think we should keep that in mind and do whatever we want after that one, with that as the basic thing. And I do believe that is where Sri Lanka should be targeting first. How can we do that one? And what scale? And also, Harsha, as we all know, whatever we do, it must be done by the industrialists. That's exactly where Mr. Pedersen is coming from. So that knowledge is very, very important. And a quick question, because to save time, Mr. Pedersen, what is the sort of scale, the minimum kind of scale that a private investor, for instance, could go in for in the hydrogen generation? You see, coupled to some renewable energy project, something like a wind farm or a solar farm, you know, that just to give our people a leg up to get going with it. Thank you very much.
That is very, how to say, difficult questions to answer, because it's really depending on the location. So even the technology and the scale that you will build would depend on what is the location. So it means how much the renewable would you have to fill this facility, because these facilities is at this point depending on volume. However, what we have been planning is the pilot project is a 1 megawatt facility. And again, you know, how to calculate this, it depends if you have 24/7 access to the renewable. If you only have 8 hours, of course, it is just like a regular plant. If your utilization rate or you're running your factory on 60%, you know, your profitability is very different from what it is when you run it for 94, 95%. So it is difficult to give the kind of a right answer to this, but I would say what is the most important now is to have pilot and demo projects, so you learn the core knowledge about the whole value chain, because this is not only about production, it is about how we are utilizing, how we are putting together a good source of renewable to these facilities. And as you mentioned as well, storage is a key part today. If big storage capacity can be built in Sri Lanka, I don't know, you know, if it can be done underground. There is some facilities in UK and in the US which have caves, which is, you know, very well suited for it. Then the cost is coming down dramatically, and you can be, you know, really have an advantage. But when we coming past this kind of pilot project, I would say 50 megawatt is and up should be for industrial purposes. But in India today, there is 10, there is 20, but all, and this is big companies that we are working with. They want to do 1 giga immediately. And we said that if you do 1 giga, you can, you know, it will go wrong. You will never really get the benefits of it. You need to learn to walk before you start running, or you will be hurt. And that's what we also emphasize this about safety, because people have a tendency to think that accidents only happens others. It doesn't happen me, and this we don't need to invest in. That is a very dangerous thought, and India has seen it many times in different industries, in processing plants, and it's hard to change a habit. So we need to focus on developing the good habits and understanding, and these things will go quite well. I'm extremely optimistic about Sri Lanka's future, but it is important that we are working together. So everybody have to be put behind this, to have this enthusiasm and passion for utilizing these resources for the benefit of the industry, but also for the people. It has to come back to the people. This is a resource that the people of Sri Lanka owns, and that's why it is important that the framework are good in place, and the commercial interest find it very attractive to invest in Sri Lanka, because the policies, frameworks, everything is in place. But at the end of the day, the benefits, the hard currency need to come back to the country so you can develop it even further.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pedersen. And since you are in a hurry to leave, we would like to take this opportunity to thank you. And Mr. Nimal Pereira is wishing that he should have a word with you with the session to extend a proper vote of thanks to you before you leave. Mr. Nimal Pereira, you can speak up.
Yeah, thank you, Harsha. Thank you, Cyril, for your contribution. It's an excellent presentation, excellent knowledge sharing session. Again, my thanks goes to you as well as my friend Professor Dayalan from HBL University, who connected me to you to deliver this event. Even with a short time period, we communicated, and then you managed to do this presentation very effectively, very soundly for us. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch, especially with SLEMA, all of you changeovers. Thank you very much, Cyril.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best, and thank you again for the invitation. It's always nice to talk to such knowledgeable people and enthusiasts who wants the best for the country. So whatever we can do in the future, I welcome, and I will facilitate this Center of Excellence as well, so everybody can be working together on this mission.
Thank you, Mr. Pedersen. And we will move on with the sessions. And the final presentation today is from Mr. Sali Wickramasuriya. He had been a tower of strength for us, especially in the natural gas sphere in our country. We have made some discoveries, and he's heading a very important new sector in our country. Mr. Wickramasuriya, he joined the upstream oil and gas industry in 1984, working for Schlumberger, the largest petroleum service company in the world, and serving 20 years in the industry. And he returned to Sri Lanka in 2004, and he was appointed the chairman and DG of the Sri Lanka Board of Investment. And he was heading the Ports Authority back in 2006. And he spearheaded the expansion of the Colombo Port, Hambantota Port Phase 1 and Oilwell Port projects. So he retired from the government service in June 2017 after spending 6 previous years as a Director General of the Petroleum Resources Development Secretariat, the agency tasked with exploration activities in our country. And Mr. Wickramasuriya currently works for the advisory capacity to the Hambantota International Ports Group and maintains close links with the Sri Lanka Ports Authority and broader maritime and logistics community of Sri Lanka, working on strategies to position and promote Sri Lanka as an international maritime hub. So he will have some wonderful thoughts to share with us today. So I warmly welcome Mr. Wickramasuriya. The floor is yours, Mr. Wickramasuriya.
Thank you, Harsha. Thank you, Chair, for the kind introduction. And thank you to the SLEMA for inviting me back to another annual session. I'm delighted to be back, and it's an honor and privilege to be here with you. Just a small update. I think you're using the profile that was from my previous session participation. I am back in the government and I am wearing a couple of hats in these various capacities, but that's the least important thing. I think let's get right down to it and share
Sorry
with you
about it,
some.
Mr. Gramsere. I think you are heading the Petroleum Development Authority. Am I right? As the chairman?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes.
Sorry for
It's
that,
an extension of what I did before, but
exactly.
it doesn't really change anything. I was just going to say it appears from here that I am not in the government, but I am, and that has significance because my role to talk about at the moment is current government initiatives. So I just wanted to make that clarification. So now, let's, many of you might be wondering what a professional petroleum engineer is doing in a forum such as this. And you could be right to wonder. That's a good question. As a career petroleum engineer who has spent most of my life finding and producing oil for people, I have now come to the conclusion that most fossil fuels are best left where they are in the ground, unless they are absolutely necessary for the survival of an economy. Now in Sri Lanka, we are still in that stage. So for the sake of clarity and to avoid any doubt, we do plan to continue exploring for oil and gas offshore in our extended economic zone. And we do plan for as long as we continue to import fossil fuels, and for as long as there isn't an effective mechanism to compensate for what we might lose out on economic benefit by what is commonly referred to as the north-south climate injustice. In other words, we've lost out on the chance to economically benefit from the production of fossil fuels. We will continue to produce fossil fuels, and we will start fairly soon. But that's relevant to why the PDA is the implementing authority in Sri Lanka for this. Let me actually, what I'll do here, let me share the screen. And yeah, can you see that?
Yes, we can see it now. Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Now we can proceed.
Thank you very much. So how this now Sterling has very clearly outlined what India are doing, and or rather I would say what Greenstat are doing in India to spread the development of the technology and the knowledge base surrounding green hydrogen economy. And we applaud that. And as he said, we would like to reproduce it here in Sri Lanka. However, a center of excellence or a think tank can only go so far. Then you need a fairly boring component, which is the implementing agency, which parties with authority can proceed to implement projects on the ground. That's where we come in, and that's two of us here, and we'll see that in a moment. Before I actually get to that part, I would like to make a small clarification about the environment that prevails in Sri Lanka when it comes to resource development. By resource, I mean whether it's a natural resource that lies below the ground, such as minerals or hydrocarbon and fossil fuel, or renewable resources that are above the ground, such as wind and solar. There are generally in the world two major divisions of how this is managed. And many Western countries, developed countries, we can call them, use what is known as a concessional regime, which is where they allocate a section by geography, usually, to be developed by a company. And they never even had ownership of the resources in that concession. Rather, the state derived its benefit by taxing the profit of the company that develops and markets the resource. Now, in Sri Lanka and many other developing countries, we have what is known as a contractual regime. So we don't have a concessional regime, we have a contractual regime. Now, the importance of the contractual regime is that the state retains ownership of all resources, whether they are below the ground or above the ground. And the state actually needs to participate or sees itself as participating in the exploitation of those resources. So that might give you a background as to why there are two state institutions in partnership with Greenstat, led, of course, in technology and direction by Greenstat, but representing the state in the implementing of the feasibility study and pilot project you will see shortly.
Mr. Vikram Surya, your slides are not moving.
I know, I'm just moving them now.
Okay.
Can you see this?
You have to share again. I think our slide came in firstly.
Yep, you're right.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so let me move to. Can you see that picture?
Yes, the map of Sri Lanka, we can clearly see that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is only for 2 seconds, just to highlight something, which is a wind intensity map, speed distribution map. It comes from a World Bank report submitted to the Petroleum Development Authority, and I'm sure the Sustainable Energy Authority and other institutions in Sri Lanka, shared with me very kindly by the Sustainable Energy Authority. And it simply highlights what has already been said, in that in terms of the sweetness of prospect capacity and the combination of capacity access, that is by shallow water, allowing land planting of facilities, and wind speed and plant factor 50% plus, Sri Lanka does represent a very sweet wind investment environment. A little bit more detail. We've heard that these numbers can go from, what you can see in front of you is approximately 40 gigawatts. We've also seen reports that there are 90 gigawatts available around Sri Lanka for wind, possibly wind and solar. But the important point of this slide is this: with an installed capacity right now of 4 gigawatts and the general daytime peak loads of 2.8 gigawatts, it doesn't look like it's going to be possible for Sri Lanka to consume all of this energy potential herself. So in other words, until we find the means of dispatching this economically, exporting it in some form or the other, we are still going to be talking about our wind potential for a long, long time. Because we are a small company, a small grid, a small country, a small grid, and a small economy. So even the concept of exporting it as electricity to India is limited by the pipe size of the link, which has yet to be established. So what we see as the implementing authority representing the government of Sri Lanka in this project, we see that this technology and this approach allows, in fact, is about the only thing that will allow Sri Lanka to monetize over a period of time her potential. Everything else has a bottleneck or a glass ceiling that makes us simply look at this number and be pleased about it, but not be able to do anything with it. Now, how do we come into it from the PDA? It's a matter of jurisdiction. So that jointly, there are 2 institutions that are in this project with Greenstat, which represent the government. There are many more stakeholders also in the government and many more in the private sector and academia. But from the implementing authority point of view, those that will get the jobs done are 2, the Petroleum Development Authority and the Sustainable Energy Authority. You may have seen an older version of this map before. This is the revised version, and you will note that those areas that you saw in dark red on the wind intensity map or the wind potential map overlap with these blocks, which means that when we give these blocks out for the purpose of petroleum exploration, which is our primary mandate, we also need to be cognizant that within those blocks, there might be parties developing or interested in developing renewable resources. So we came to that point a lot earlier than we expected. Many of you are aware, and some of my fellow panelists have shared slides which showed social representations and shareholder representations, all of which have caused significant impacts at board levels of very large prior oil and gas companies. These companies have all, under massive pressure and internal economical imperatives, have transformed themselves into energy companies. And even those companies, therefore, speaking with us in Sri Lanka about potential offshore Sri Lanka for the exploration and production of hydrocarbon, they want to have a renewable energy component. They absolutely want to have hybrid or combination energy projects. And this is not greenwashing. They actually do want to phase hydrocarbons out and phase renewable energy in to their own portfolios. So in Sri Lanka, there we have multiple working petroleum systems. The various in various distributed locations, these have actually been discovered as reservoirs and tested. But the bigger potential exists, and it's reflected by the fact that over the last, I would say, 6 months, large oil and gas companies worldwide, or I would say large energy companies worldwide, have purchased around $10 million worth of our data. Now, they're doing that with the long term in mind, but the fact that they're purchasing data from Sri Lanka means they believe that Sri Lanka has, apart from the wind potential we've just seen, Sri Lanka has substantial hydrocarbon potential too, which it does. So now, in a blend of those two, we need to have organizations that have jurisdiction over those areas with the high potential. I hope that makes sense. So we have these two organizations on the ground. One is the PDA, Petroleum Development Authority of Sri Lanka. The other one is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Sri Lanka. And we have, with Sterle's team's guidance, over the last 1.5 to 2 years, structured an agreement for a feasibility study and pilot project. And this is just for you to read on the screen. I will not be reading it out to you. It's just to give you the comfort that this is an active live project and has been established at a national level. So you can take a quick look, and I have no objection to this presentation being circulated. We will briefly touch on the aspects that are covered here in the scope later on. But you can see it's been signed by the DG of the Petroleum Development Authority, Sturle himself, the Norwegian ambassador, and the Minister of Energy. And I just witnessed it. A quick overview of these two institutions, because my role is the government part. You guys have beautifully covered all of the technology, all of the history, all of the applications, and the general global imperative. But here we are. These are the two acts that give us teeth, the ability to execute projects on the ground. And the salient parts are actually not so much obvious in the objectives of the Petroleum Development Act. They're encapsulated further down, which is jurisdiction over offshore areas. But if you look at, for the purpose of petroleum exploration, if you look at the Sustainable Energy Authority Act, which many of you are from, so you must know by heart, it is to declare energy development areas. Those are the salient points. I believe it was Sterling who mentioned that the stuff we have below the ground and above the ground actually does belong to the Republic. And what is the Republic? The Republic is us. It's the state, it's the people. Now that ties in with what I said about this being a contractual regime. The regime is where the government owns the resource and develops it in partnership with somebody else and shares in the process. That's the overall, it's a resource sharing mechanism, and therefore needs development, whether it's a subsurface completion system and pipeline that brings oil and gas to surface, to land, or whether it's an offshore wind and floating solar installation that brings electricity to land. they're both resources that belong to the Republic, and they both need to be treated in the same way. On the subject of treatment, allow me to take 2 minutes just to make a small point. Both these areas, the petroleum resource development and the surface, the renewable renewable energy development, require significant investment. And wherever investment is spoken about in Sri Lanka, there is automatically the concept of incentives. What is the incentive to invest? And I think one of my fellow panelists mentioned the word tax break. So I'd like to dig a little deeper into that concept, because that is a general misunderstanding as to what investment is and what investments actually attract tax breaks or not. So let's just say, for example, a large oil and gas company comes to Sri Lanka and says, we're going to spend $1 billion, we're going to invest $1 billion, and we're going to drill several wells, and we're going to produce the oil that is what we find, and we are going to export it. Now, in that situation, that most of what they spend, most of that $1 billion does not get spent in Sri Lanka. There will be some jobs created, of course, but by and large, it will be spent overseas. And the resource, which is, as we now know, is both morally and legally the resource that belongs to the people, has been exported. Now, that investment does not need to be given a tax break, because a tax break is really something that investment, one assumes that the investor has priced their cost recovery and profit based on their investment and internal expectations, and that's the end of that. But if, on the other hand, that oil was to be, or gas or electricity was to be sent into Sri Lanka to be used and consumed by the people, and the market conditions within the country do not permit adequate pricing to be met to meet the return on investment expectations, or there are significant, and I would say there are significant non-financial or indirect benefits to the nation, massive employment, secondary economy, indirect economy, investment, all that, then in that case, that is worthy of a tax concession. So I just want to make that concept that investment number alone does not attract tax concessions, and very few places in the world incentivize commercial resource exploitation projects. So we don't really necessarily want to go down the road of looking at big tax breaks to attract companies to come in here and export our resources to markets outside. Now, if on the other hand, they bring it to the market within us and the state policy is to subsidize it, in such cases, tax incentives and other incentives may be necessary. So that's just a little diversion. The roadmap. Now, this is what Greenstat have shared with us as being the work programs in 4 stages of the project that you have seen is actually live now. There's going to be a mapping of the demand and supply side, looking at what policy and regulatory interventions are required to promote green hydrogen investment. Now, necessarily see promote, not anything else. If incentives mechanisms are required, and they may not necessarily be fiscal incentives, they may be regulatory incentives and other ease of doing business incentives. How do we promote competitive clean hydrogen? And how do we actually pilot it? And I think Sterling mentioned a 1 megawatt project, which is actually going to take it from, if you like, essentially from beginning to end of the whole production chain, and feed it into some vessels or vehicles that will ply what we hope will be our first green corridor, and be proof of concept and create the opportunity to build use cases and business cases on that. And I think, Para, you were asking about scale. A lot of your questions will be answered when this project feasibility and pilot get completed. because there will be some parameters that can be varied to determine level of engagement. A little bit more, a little bit more detail. Again, I'll let you read it. It's not something I will repeat for you. So what next? We've already recognized a lot of advantages to Sri Lanka, but one of the unseen benefits is that we can implement large-scale renewable energy technology without the constraints of feed-in tariff or grid connection requirements. This project is off-grid. As such, we don't have any interface, if you like, with the national grid and therefore the CEB. Therefore, we can, independently of the CEB, implement offshore, or I would say captive, off-grid renewable energy technology at a scale that will allow testing economies and eventually help us towards meeting our energy security goals. It's an important point. Leaving aside all the economic benefit, successive generations of planners in the energy sector have successfully left Sri Lanka hugely dependent on imported energy. And there is no excuse for that. The last 10, 20, 30 years, there are various causes, but no excuses. So now we are left depending on imported energy, either in the form of coal or oil or product, crude oil or product, to give us energy security. For that, we need dollars and all of that. That cycle you're well familiar with. The other thing we've already said, the number 2 on the advantages, we know that now there is a mechanism either way, either through green hydrogen generated ammonia or green hydrogen generated methanol. There is a means of capturing the energy for storage, which of course means you can export it without needing a pipeline or a wire. So in other words, this technology represents the one chance that we can currently see. There may be others emerging in the future. The one chance that we can currently see to actually capture the potential of Sri Lanka's wind and solar resources. I think it was Dan that showed us the value, but that value is still academic without a mechanism to get us there. Now, it also reduces carbon footprint, and this is a subject that you, ladies and gentlemen, are possibly more expert at than me. But I'm aware that we have a national decarbonization plan with a net zero carbon target by 2050. And I am aware that our current plans do not yet reflect it. So hopefully we can insert this technology and this pilot scaled up accordingly into all of the above. And the green ammonia for organic fertilizer, if indeed the issue is the organicness of the fertilizer, then in that case, we are able to make organic fertilizer, keeping in mind that urea does occur naturally too. We are able to make organic urea from organic ammonia generated by reformation with organic, I think it's combination and reformation, organic with green hydrogen. So that's green ammonia, can be exported, can be used in the domestic fertilizer industry at a certain price point, etc., etc. So what's going to happen in the next few weeks? We have been constrained over the last few months it's been a little frustrating, the inability to actually plan with all the general upheavals in the government and socially, and our restrictions on travel, etc. We do plan. This is a project that will be conducted by GreenStat in Sri Lanka. So we will set up some kind of presence in Sri Lanka. We will facilitate that, create green hydrogen focus groups, which would include the working group that Nimal is head of, and set up all the institutional linkages in Sri Lanka to the universities and to the other potentially commercial partners, such as industrial institutions, transport institutions, etc. We're going to compile, study, and evaluate all available resource material. Now, this is an essential part of this project. I have to say, this is not an investment. It's not a foreign investment for foreign return on investment. This is actually investment by GreenStat and partners into Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka doesn't actually spend any money on this project other than covering our own costs. But the combined, shall we say, the combined activities are expected to result in a huge transfer of knowledge and expertise to all of the linkages that Sri Lanka puts together to constitute the eventual center of excellence that Sterling was referring to. So all of that will then help us to frame the feasibility study in the context of both the global market, meaning the market conditions, supply and demand, technology adaptations, and national policy. And where national policy doesn't exist, which is quite possible in this case, we would make a recommendation for such policy, because all future projects can then follow the policy that we put in place, because then risk is reduced and benefit is maximized. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sali Wickramasurya. And even being a Sri Lankan, I was not aware of the great happenings in this arena, and it was quite a revealing thing, irrespective of the present political upheavals in the country. I think we have a way forward, especially looking at the things we intend to do, and hydrogen being a very promising energy vector. So that brings to us to the close of the presentations. And now we can have the Q&A sessions. I think most of the questions posted on the Q&A had been answered already, but we have some little bit of time because we are trying to wind up before 1 o'clock. So if you have any more questions, please raise your hands. I can provide an opportunity for you to speak to. So Mr. Tissa Lianagi, yes, you can speak up, Mr. Lianagi. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a question from Salia. I would like to know the location where you are planning to do the pilot project of green hydrogen. Is it?
Sorry, so you said the location that we are planning to do this particular pilot project?
Yes.
We don't know that yet, but presumably it'll be in an area of optimum wind conditions, because to be fair, we may have a better answer to this question after we've done the feasibility study, but it looks to me like it'll be in the northeast part of the country for access, and essentially because of the scale, we can probably work on a land-based platform, but I'm speaking beyond my authority here. It's GreenStat who are going to guide us there.
Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wickramasurya. Chipping in, I think it is going to be definitely the northern and eastern, and even Rajarata, because that is where the most of the wind resources are found. So we have a very good potential there. And any further questions from the audience? Let me check the Q&A box whether there are any new questions. In the absence, I have a personal question to Mr. Millicent, if you are around. That is, what if we start electrolyzing salt water instead of just water? Is there a possibility to do that? We have so much salt water, the sea water right around us. Isn't it a cheaper way to produce hydrogen?
Thanks for the question. My understanding is that with the current electrolyzer technology that's commercially available, that desalinization is required first. But some of the literature that I've reviewed on this is that desalinization step adds about 10 cents US per kilogram to the cost of production. So it's not prohibitively expensive. And in the in the course of doing an integrated project, we can be looking at the production of water, drinking water, hydrogen, oxygen, and then if we're offshore, co-located aquaculture, maybe ecotourism at some point. So, I would emphasize this opportunity of looking at, the ability to have multiple revenue streams. It's not just the hydrogen or the hydrogen-derived products. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Millicent. And we have one more question from Mr. Parakrama Jayasinghe.
Yeah, thank you, Harshad. I was just trying to grab a minute before you wind up. Now, this is continuing on the comment I made earlier. I got a couple of replies already, but the point I want to make, Harsha, is let's be realistic. You see, now we know hydrogen is very definitely an attractive proposition, and in fact, this has been talked about for many years. I remember you maybe joined me for a discussion about 10 years ago also. So keep that in mind, keeping our sort of mind-blowing kind of numbers that are there. What I would like to suggest is that we should be getting it at the ground level, at the scale that we can immediately with our own resources implement it. Now that's the question I asked from Mr. Pedersen. He answered very well, but I think that potential is still available for us. So again, here what I wanted to emphasize is, let's emphasize that what he also said, that it is a storage medium. Therefore, let's not get distracted by this potential of it becoming a transport fuel and that kind of thing. Because you know very well, at the present circumstances, the answer to transport is electric. There are no other question about it. So this gives us a great opportunity to enhance our renewable energy development by storage when either the grid is not available, or when the sun is not shining, or when the wind is blowing intermittently. So I believe that this can be done at that kind of scale by our local investors themselves. So in fact, what I wanted to propose today is, let's have another session. I would say primarily Sri Lankan people here, put together our own knowledge and experiences and all that, to look at a very, very short-term action plan, which can be implemented by ourselves. You know very well that the one success story we have is the rooftop program was possible thanks to SCA for getting that policy right. After that was driven entirely by the private sector. Now, the same thing can happen here too, right? So we also, I must remind you that you are instrumental in, we have a national energy policy which says we must have 25% light vehicles being electric by 2023. But that is just a policy document, nobody is looking at it. Now let's leverage on those things. So rather than going in for yet another technology, other infrastructure which are required if you have to use hydrogen for transport, there's something on the ground we can use immediately. Let's focus on that. So rather than a question, my request, let's have another session ourselves, down to earth. You see, few of us getting together and see what can be done now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jayasinghe. And I see both Mr. Vikram Surya and Nimal Pereira from the panelist side raising their hands. You can speak up, Mr. Vikram Surya first.
Thank you, Harsha. Thank you, Para. I note that very well. And to add to the richness of your future discussion, I would like to make two clarifications. One is that the reference to storage does apply perfectly well to what you say, which is to feed in as a substitute fuel to some grid enhancement device, a generator of sort, to keep power supplies continuously. Absolutely correct. But I think the scale at which the benefit that can be realized that Sterling was referring to was primarily export as a liquid in large volumes and aviation and marine fuel, not necessarily land-based fuel. Land-based fuel will be a pilot project. Now, if you can solve the issue of, if you're using it in the scenario that you're proposing, which I totally agree with, where investment starts with a view to using it to defray or to shall we say to supply power, in short, then you're going to have to overcome the discussion with the Sinhala Electricity Board on tariff. So good luck with that. I'm just I'm simply pointing out the practicalities. Either way, our pilot project, which we are going to grab you as well at some point as a stakeholder, will take all these into account and hopefully come up within a 12-month period of how we can get the maximum involvement of local developers and investors. I hope that gives you some comfort.
Yeah, quick comeback, Harsha. Today, there is a cabinet paper with the enhanced tariff for the NCR projects. Unfortunately, it does not carry a number for storage electricity. So I hope that will come through. And to Salia, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And also, the other thing is, today there's a Twitter message from the minister saying that CEB needs to be debundled. So put together, I'm having my hopes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Fingers crossed.
And one final question we can take from Mr. Atula Savarasinghe.
Good afternoon. I'm actually interested in knowing the levelized cost of hydrogen, and when they said that it could be produced at a cost of $2 US, I wonder what the pressure, the output pressure is of that product, and if we can have a kind of a scale to work on, where if we know what the electricity costs and water costs would be, whether we could compute a levelized cost of hydrogen by ourselves. So that type of data is not available, and can that data be made available? And I also understand that various electrolyzer manufacturing companies have different technologies, and their levelized cost of hydrogen would vary as a result. So I think NEL might be able to give us a fair idea on that.
Yeah, if possible, Mr. Melissa.
Well, I showed the one graphic there that showed the cost of production for green hydrogen with electrolysis. It depends on the electricity input cost, the capital cost of the electrolyzer, and the load factor on the electrolyzers. Now, generally, you know, a rule of thumb, and this is just a rule of thumb, is that to get to $2 per kilogram hydrogen, that the electricity has to be less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour, or less than $20 per megawatt hour. But I also, you know, but the the $2 per kilogram is just a target, right? That's not, that's not some immutable law of nature. The $2 per kilogram is linked to natural gas at $6 per million BTU, which is where, hydrogen from natural gas has been for some time. You can certainly look at those charts and try and get an idea of where, where you might end up. Now, just for example, if you have an existing hydropower plant in Sri Lanka that's fully amortized and depreciated, the cost of the electricity from that plant is not the tariff, it's not the offtake price. The cost of the electricity is the O&M cost. So if that O&M cost is, say, $5 per megawatt hour instead of $20 per megawatt hour, then the cost of production of hydrogen using that electricity is going to be mainly a function of the electrolyzer cost and the number of hours per year that the electrolyzer runs. So I hope that's clear. Thanks.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, we have no further time left for the Q&A. And I thank all of the panelists for being with us for so long. But before the formal vote of thanks now, and invite the session host, the Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association, to take forward this session. And it was my real pleasure to be a part of this important annual session, the 33rd annual session of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. And I am very thankful to the president and the board of members for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be here with you. And I hope every one of you learned many things on hydrogen from the industry leaders and what is happening in Sri Lanka especially. So without taking any more of your time, let me hand over the controls to Mitma Vijay Singh of the Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harsha, for chairing the session. Yeah. The session was indeed fruitful. As we have come towards the end of the session, I would now like to invite the committee chair of the annual sessions, the senior vice president of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association, Mr. Kamal Ileperuma, to propose the vote of thanks. Mr. Ileperuma, over to you.
Okay, Etpa, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear
Kamal.
me?
Yes, Mr. Kamal. We can hear you.
Yeah. I'll try to switch on my video, but it's not responding like any. Yeah. Anyway, you can hear me. Yeah. So thank you, Metma. So I believe that we had a wonderful session, technical session on green hydrogen at the 33rd annual session of Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. So I think everybody believes that it's a timely topic in this looming situation of energy crisis in the country and all over the world as well. With very volatile energy markets, prices going up and scarcity and so on. So people are looking for alternative fuels, energy sources which are cleaner, cheaper and sustainable and so on. So with that, I believe that green hydrogen is a very good competitive source as per the presentation what we have today. So SLEMA choose that topic with discussion at the board meetings. So there were several proposals for different themes, but finally we end up with this theme of green hydrogen. Particularly, I must mention that Mr. Nimal Para was quite instrumental to go through to this in choosing this topic of green hydrogen. As he mentioned, he's quite happy today, and thank you, Nimal, for that effort. And even after choosing the topic, that when we are organizing the sessions in finding resource personnel and also coordinating with them and also organizing the event, the commitment and dedication we have seen from you, we received from you, is commendable, and thank you once again. And then this event will not be a success unless the support we received from the Asian Development Bank as technical partner. So, and also they were helping us in finding resource personnel as well. So even in the past, the Asian Development Bank has come up, stepped in at occasions where we need assistance in relation to energy related activities which we have conducted at SLEMA. So our very big thanks to Asian Development Bank for their support to make this event a success. And then we had a very elaborative and informative presentations today, which gave us a very wide in-depth into the subject. So all the presenters today, thank you very much, Mr. Dan Bryan, the keynote speaker, and then Mr. Nimal Pereira, then Professor Ajit Alvis from University of Moratuwa, and then Mr. Sturil Pedersen from Greenstat, Norway, and then Mr. Sali Vikramasuriya from the Petroleum Development Authority. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and taking time to make very informative presentations. We have been honored and privileged to have you on board as presenters at these annual sessions, and thank you very much. And then my gratitude goes to the session chair, who has done a wonderful job, our own Mr. Harsha Vikramasinghe, for the job well done. Thank you, Harsha. And then our session would not be a success otherwise without the audience. We had a very quite a good audience today, a large participation we have seen. So thank you very much for the interest taken in joining this annual session. And so I hope that you would have got quite a wide in-depth knowledge onto the subject, with all these presentations. And thank you. So if you are not a SLEMA members, if you are quite interested, you can join with SLEMA in our future energy related activities as well. Then so I must thank the annual session committee of the SLEMA, which we have set up to organize this event. So they have been working for last few months, you know, with all the difficulties in the domestic arena. Day by day, things are changing with such difficulties. They have taken a tireless effort to make this event a success. So the SLEMA wish to thank them as well. And then SLEMA office staff, Metma, Harshani, and Amila. So they have done a tremendous job. And their commitment, their dedication, and they worked long hours at SLEMA office in organizing this event. And SLEMA would like to thank them as well. So with that, we conclude this annual sessions, and thank you very much. Have a nice day.